there are a lot of background material here in order for this all to even make any kind of sense. First of all, in the United States, and we're not taking sides, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative here. The President of the United States, can the President of the United States fire the director of the FBI? I'll pause a moment for you to think. Trump fired James Comey, and nobody impeached him for that. And then the guy that he named instead of him, James Comey, Christopher Wray, Trump fired him for the second one. Now he's got Kash Patel. Presidents may fire the head of the FBI. It makes sense. You're the President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, Chief Executive. You have certain law enforcement objectives, and you need to have somebody that you're working with. So the president, it's a no-brainer. If any of you were thinking a moment saying, gee, I don't know, can he? Can't he? May he not? That's she. That's only because we don't normally think about it. But it's because it goes without saying. President may name and may fire the head of the FBI. One more. May the president fire the attorney general. Well, we know Nixon fired Archibald Cox. He wasn't the attorney general exactly. And anyway, Nixon got stopped for everything he tried to do. So we don't have proof either way yet. Trump fired Sessions. And he actually liked Sessions as a person, but Sessions was not doing the job he needed. Doesn't matter. Maybe Trump made a big mistake, but he fired Sessions and he hired Bill Barr. And if he had a little more time, if there were, say, he would have fired Bill Barr. He didn't get it. He didn't get quite what he was looking for. But presidents fire attorney general all the time because, as Beth Fox says to everyone, attorney general is part of the executive branch, responds to the president, etc. Okay. Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu tried to fire Ronen Bar, who is the head of the Israeli FBI. Ronen Bar said publicly, you just read it in the papers, I'm not leaving. I don't respect his right to fire me. So Netanyahu fired him again, and Bar brought a lawsuit to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of Israel is corrupt. It's Tisha B'Av, let's call it. And the Supreme Court held, on the one hand, we're not going to let Netanyahu fire Ronen Bar. On the other hand, we know how corrupt that looks to make that ruling. So we beg Netanyahu and Bar to work out something privately. But no, we will not allow the president, the prime minister, to fire the head of the FBI, the head of the Shin Bet. Again, we know how bad that looks. So we're asking you guys to take it off our shoulders and work something out. And the compromise they worked out is that Barr said, I won't let you fire me, but in a month, I quit. You know, it's like from the comedies. You can't fire me, I quit. That's how it works in Israel. Prime Minister did not have the authority. He does, but it's such a deep state that after he names the head of the FBI, the Shin Bet, turns out he doesn't have the power to fire him. Now, what does the Shin Bet do? Like the FBI, they're in charge of law and order, security. Ronen Bar was the head of the Shin Bet. It's known by various names. Its full name is Sherut Bitachon Klali. Sherut means services. Bitachon, security. Klali, general. General security services. The FBI of Israel is General Security Services. The three letters that start the three words, Sherut Bitachon Klali, Shabak. So some refer to it as the Shabak. And some refer to it just by the first two letters, Shin Bet, like FBI. So Ronen Bar, if for no other reason, if Netanyahu needed a reason, and really, Trump does not need a reason to fire James Comey or Christopher Wray. But if he needed a reason, Ronen Bar was the head of the FBI on October 7, and Car 54, where are you? Okay. The FBI there is part of the deep state. They answer to their own agenda, just as we later learned that the FBI was not working for Trump, that people like inside Peter Strzok, Lisa Payne, Andrew McCabe, and we're soon going to find out more about James Comey, and we're going to find out some of the CIA people and some of the national intelligence people like Clapper. These guys have their own government. They're answerable to no one. And they basically took down Trump as much as they could. So it is in Israel. The Shin Bet has its own agenda. Now, for us as American Jews, and those of you in Israel watching, and from other parts of the world, that's the image we have. The Shin Bet is like the image we had in the 1960s and 70s of the FBI, that they are good people doing patriotic work. But if we're fair, they've always had something not right, sometimes from the right wing, abusing civil rights, not only the left. The FBI, decided they wanted to get rid of Martin Luther King. And full disclosure, Martin Luther King Jr. is one of my lifetime heroes. I was a boy, and he's one of my lifetime heroes. Full disclosure. The FBI decided to destroy Martin Luther King. They didn't know how good they had it having a black leader like that. They decided he's really a communist. And for all I know, he was, I don't know. And so they secretly wiretapped him without court permission. And they found out private things that many of you may have learned over the years. While he was being wiretapped privately in his bedroom, there were women in that bedroom besides his wife. I'll say that no more. I did not need to know that as a boy growing up, and I never would have needed to know it. I don't need to know the peccadillos of certain people. I don't need to know that. And the idea that the government would try to destroy someone fighting for civil rights so that black people could eat at a lunch counter and use the same toilet and water fountain as a white person, that they would disclose that. So that's deep state. That's what deep state is. In Israel, the deep state, the FBI, the Shin Bet, is extreme left wing. And we'll get to that more in a moment. The Attorney General. In the United States, the job of the Attorney General is to be not the personal lawyer for the president. The president has his own or her own personal lawyer. The Attorney General is the attorney for the president's administration, for the country. Not that everybody gets to go and say, can you do this? But he represents or she represents the government. So most of the attorneys general are really very partisan because they represent their government. So Obama had Eric Holder. He had Loretta Lynch. These were not straight and narrow players, but that's okay. That's okay. Joe Biden had the character we just had, Merrick Garland, very partisan leftist, but that's okay. The people, if you believe the 2020 election was valid, the people chose the Biden-Harris team, and they're entitled to have their attorney general. That's fine. And on the other side, Trump now has Pam Bondi. And before that, he had Sessions, and he had Bill Barr. And I don't know, Reagan had Ed Meese, and so on and so forth. That's fine. John F. Kennedy had his brother, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., or Robert F. Kennedy. His brother is the attorney general. But that's okay. A lot of people tried to make a thing of it. Maybe it is a thing. But the Attorney General represents the government, but not in Israel. The Attorney General is a corrupt left-winger. And here's what happens. When the government of Israel brings like what's going on now with Trump, and I'm not for him or against him in this class. You know my personal opinions, they have nothing to do with this class. Trump is trying to accomplish certain things, and the Democrats run to court, and they get Obama judges and Biden judges to strike it down. And then Trump appeals to the appellate courts and the Supreme Court. And his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, takes those fights. She doesn't necessarily personally argue them in court. She may have the Solicitor General doing that. But she's there. And except for this Jeffrey Epstein stuff, I mean, she's Trump's right-hand man, female version. An attorney, Eric Holder, for Obama, but not in Israel. The lady Galit Baharav Maria, or I'm going blank a moment, Miara, Baharav Miara. She'll announce the government has filed the following appeal to the Supreme Court, and I don't agree with the government, so I will not be representing the government in the case. But in my capacity as Attorney General, I am ruling that no attorney in Israel either may represent the government in this case. The government may not have legal representation in this case. And this goes on all the time. And every time Netanyahu says, I'm going to fire her, they bring 100,000 leftists into the Kaplan Square in Tel Aviv on a Saturday night and announce Netanyahu is a threat to democracy. He's a fascist, just like Trump, a Hitler. He's going to take away your democratic rights. He's going to take away free speech. And half the country is left-wing, radical. And it's all over because the Attorney General won't represent the government. The third corruption is the Supreme Court. One example, because of time and facts. Several of you are attorneys or went to law school. And those of you that never went to law school, you probably know this anyway. When the courts hand down a decision under the rule of stare decisis, a Latin term, that becomes precedent for future cases. So when a case comes up, lawyer representing one side or the other researches. Has this case ever come up before, or something like it? And what was the decision? And if the decision was like what I want this case to be, I'll present to the court in writing, it's called a brief, and then orally, in oral argument, I will present to the court that there once was a case like it, and it came out that way, and that's how this one should come out, because of stare decisis. You always have to follow the previous cases. And on the other hand, let's say you're doing a research and turns out that there was a case like it in the past and it came out the wrong way, the bad way. What a lawyer does is goes to the court writing and orally and says, Your Honors, there was a case just like or very similar to this 8 years ago, and this court held the other way. And I'm asking you not to follow that court, not on grounds that you should make up new law, but on grounds that I want you to see there was a difference in that case. In that case, it may not be obvious, but like the guy had a 3-minute warning. And in this case, there was no warning. Or in that case, it was he had a prior arrest. And in this case, I'm making it up. I don't know. In that case, there were no signatures on the document. In this case, there were 2 signatures on the document. And you try to, but the idea is that the way law works is you almost never make up a new rule. The courts are supposed to look at the past. What have been the past cases or the laws on the books? And they're supposed to interpret that stuff and apply it to the case in front of them. but not in Israel. In Israel, it used to be that way like the rest of the world, the free world. But a guy named Aharon Barak, who was the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court around 20 years ago, created a revolution at a time that there was a left-wing government, left-wing prime minister. The media is always left-wing, so he could get away with it. And he announced from now on, the courts should look to previous cases for what we refer to as not mandatory law, but persuasive value. Look at how previous cases were decided. But as far as the decision that a court hands down today, whatever the case, the judges are allowed to rule as they feel, as their emotions send them. And if you feel that in the past it's always been a way that you don't agree with, a judge can make the other call. In other words, all the past law goes out the books, and everybody becomes Sotomayor and Kajendra, or whatever her name is, Katanji, where you just make up the law that you feel like, where you don't even need to research, because when it comes before Katanji Jackson and Sotomayor, you know right away what's going to happen. By the way, in all fairness, something like that with Scalia and with Thomas also. You always know how Scalia and Thomas are going to come out on the right, and how Katanji and Sotomayor are going to come out on the left, with very few exceptions. The most honest version is something along the lines of Roberts and Barrett and the two guys that Trump named, Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch, and a little bit Elena Kagan sometimes is honest. In Israel, you can make it up, whatever you feel like. So you got leftist judges in the majority. You got a leftist news media. And no matter what the Knesset rules, there's a deep state. People go to vote. They elect a government based on certain promises, and their vote doesn't matter because Ronan Bar says, I don't recognize your authority. And the Attorney General says, I'm not going to represent you. And the Supreme Court says, go ahead and represent them. We're going to throw it out anyway. That, my friends, is a deep state. Netanyahu has been winning elections for 20 years, and I'm critical of him. He doesn't seem to know the word win. He seems to know how to win battles, but not a war. And I've been critical of a lot of things about Netanyahu. He's not my greatest hero. I like Begin more, and he was not my greatest hero. But he was pretty good. And I liked Shamir more, but the two of them weren't religious, so they had their problems. Today, the one I like most today would be Smotrich. And he doesn't have majority support, but he's the man for me. So I'm not here because I love Netanyahu. And his day of reckoning will come, not in a religious way, but sooner or later, one of these days, he's going to have to pay a price for October 7, whether it was his fault or not. He was on duty that day, and he's going to pay a price. Even if he wins the next election when it comes one day, one way, even if it's history books, he'll pay a price. But he's one of the great prime ministers in Israel history, certainly up there with Begin and Shamir. The guy, what I admire about him is how he governs as well as he does, with his attorney general devoted to destroying him, the Supreme Court always against him, not even held back by precedent, and the head of the FBI, Shabak, against him. And on top of that, one more thing. Every so often I complain to you, my wonderful congregation, that I'm frustrated beyond words, that there's so much more I would do and could get done in my life if I didn't have my medical situation with my lung. And I don't whine about it. I find it a challenge that I get excited every day. How am I going to beat it today? I'm going to beat that lung, and I'm going to run 3 classes on Tisha B'Av day. Stop it. And so But I'm frustrated. Denise knows it more than anyone. How many times I've got stuff I want to do, and she'll remind me, remember, we've got to leave in an hour because you have the appointment with the pulmonary people in Cedars-Sinai, 2-hour drive. And then you're going to do a CT scan, and we have to go here for this. And then we're going to have to go here for a Bravo exam for your gastroenterology. And then we're going to have to go for an X-ray. And then there's the MRI. And then it's like I can't get anything done. Many times you get an email from me like 3 a.m. I'm finally home from all the CT scans and all the MRIs. Why am I telling you this? I can't get over how Netanyahu runs a country when 3 times a week he has to be in court. They're putting him on trial, lawfare, like what the Democrats did to Trump, how they tied him up with cases and 34 felony convictions. At least they did it to Trump when he was not in office, in between 45 and 47. And he'd have to sit in court all day. With Netanyahu, it's like he's doing court on Monday, and he has to ask the judges, please, can you postpone it till Thursday because Trump wants to meet with me in the White House on Monday. And sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they tell Trump you're not available this week, you're on trial. And so it's like Trump wants to tell Netanyahu, I think I've decided to bomb Fordo, the nuclear, but he can't find out. It's going to be postponed for a week because he's on trial. And what's he on trial for? He helped a guy who's a filmmaker, Arnon Moses or something. No, maybe I forgot his name. He's an Israeli filmmaker who makes American films. Pretty Woman with Julia Roberts, he made that. He made a lot of famous film. I mean, not just like a filmmaker that you show up in an art film. This guy's like a really serious filmmaker. He makes stuff. I think he was involved in Titanic. And it wasn't his fault that it sank. And so John Kerry, the Secretary of State under Obama, was punishing Israel to pressure Israel into a 2-state solution, and therefore would not let that guy into the country to make a movie. Because Secretary of State, we know it from Rubio, has control over the visas. So the guy called Netanyahu and asked Netanyahu, as my prime minister, can you please talk to Kerry and tell him I'm not coming on behalf of Israel. I'm making a movie. Has nothing to do with Israel. I live in London these days. I just happen to be an Israeli citizen. Can you please get me a visa to make my movie? So Netanyahu did what any proper prime minister would have done. And he called Kerry, and he got Kerry to give him a visa. In other words, you're the head of the government of a country whose citizen is being treated unfairly by another country because he's a citizen of your country, and you're trying to intervene to get him a visa to make his movie, which he made. After the guy got in, made his movie, came back, as a token of appreciation, he sent Netanyahu a box of cigars, probably Cuban cigars, very top-of-the-line cigars. And he sent him a case of champagne, probably not kosher. Now, what would I have done? And that's why I'm not the prime minister of anybody. I would not have accepted it because it doesn't look right. Even though there was nothing wrong, he's just grateful and thanking me. It doesn't look nice. Netanyahu accepts gifts. So did Shimon Peres. Shimon Peres, the Labor Party guy, once was meeting with an American Jewish leader in America, and the guy was talking the way I do with my Brooklyn hands. And Peres said to him, that's a beautiful watch. What is that? It was a diamond-encrusted watch. So the Jewish leader, obviously, if you have such a diamond watch, obviously you could afford another one. Jewish leader said, here, take it, it's yours. And Peres accepted it. Never got in trouble. So Netanyahu accepted the champagne and the cigars. And then his wife, Sarah, called up that guy or some other guy. And at that time, their son, Yair Netanyahu, was around 10 years old. This is a long time ago. Now he's in his mid-20s. It was about 15 years ago. And she said, while you're in America, could you pick up a Bugs Bunny doll for my son? A big one. So the guy did. So Netanyahu is on trial for receiving and accepting champagne, cigars, and a Bugs Bunny doll. And that's why he couldn't show up and meet with Trump to bomb nuclear reactors in Iran, because he accepted a Bugs Bunny doll. That's how deep that deep state is. It's corrupt. What ended up happening in the trial? Oh, it's in its fifth year now. Still going on. Just as I have to go to Cedars for their pulmonary doctors, thank God, and that they have good, thank God, God watches over me, sent me Denise to save my life, and she found the doctors to save my life. And another day I've got to go to this doctor and that doctor and that doctor. You have no idea. You have no idea how many doctors I have. 11 doctors I have to see. Many of them, I have nothing wrong in that area of their specialty, but they have to monitor me. People who take certain medicines that I have to take for my lung transplant have a greater proclivity to occasionally getting a skin cancer. So I've got to see a dermatologist every 2 months just to make sure there's nothing that popped up. You can't get things done when you're always running around. Baruch Hashem, Tisha B'Av, no one's bothering me today. So that's Netanyahu. 3 times a week he's in court. And there, one more of the, and that's it. And he's on trial, one of the many charges. He's accused. There's an Israeli newspaper called Yisrael Hayom, Israel Today, like USA Today. It's owned by the Sheldon. Sometimes when I've got a lot of things in mind to talk about, I go blank for a moment. So far, I haven't gone blank yet. Finally, Adelson. So Sheldon and Miriam Adelson decided they love Israel. They're in Las Vegas. He passed away a year ago or two. But they're gazillionaires. And he loves Israel. He's a right-winger. And all their media is left-wing, extreme left-wing. So he decided to create his own newspaper and give it out free every day, a daily newspaper for free. That would be the same quality as any other paper to get people to read right-wing news, like the Wall Street Journal op-ed page or the New York Post. And so he created Israel Today. So there's an allegation that Netanyahu met with someone from another Israeli newspaper and privately complained about their anti-Netanyahu coverage, and allegedly promised the editor-in-chief or publisher of that paper, if you change your newspaper party line to be pro-Netanyahu, I will repay you by passing a law in the Knesset that no daily newspaper in Israel may be circulated for free. That's the allegation. And such a law was presented to the Knesset. That news medium outlet never changed their political coverage anyway. They're still anti-Netanyahu. And when the thing came up for a vote, no daily newspaper in Israel may be circulated for free. Netanyahu voted against it. He didn't even vote for it. He denies ever making such a promise. He says the evidence, I voted against such a law. Still, he's on trial for that too. Deep state. So here's what we're going to see now. But I needed this introduction because I remember the 3-4 years ago, I didn't believe it. I felt like, look, I'm a right-winger, but I'm fair. And I felt it's just pushing it a little. And then I started learning more about it. And It's true. So here's what most of the film is going to be about. In 1993, 32 years ago, 1992, 33 years ago, Israel had elections to the Knesset. The Knesset elections, it was hokey. The way it works in Israel, I've taught you this many Sundays, is that everybody has a party. They have 20 to 30 parties to run. Not 30, but 20. 20 parties run for Knesset. And to make some form of order, to have a rule that in order for a party to get into Knesset, they need to reach a threshold. Nowadays, they need to get at least 3.25% of the vote. So if they got 3% of the vote or 2% of the vote, they don't get in, even though 3% would give them 4 seats, 3 seats at least. They don't get in, and all their votes are thrown away, literally. And then they look at the parties that got above the threshold, 3.25, and they determine what percent of the valid votes, the ones that were not thrown out, did your party get? And that's the percent of seats you get in the Knesset. Then each party ends up with 8 seats, 20 seats, 9 seats. Each party gets seats. And then they have meetings for 3 to 4 weeks afterwards where they try to form a government. With 120 Knesset seats, they need 61 for majority. And they try to horse trade. What's important to your party? So the Haredi party will say, we want a law that our boys cannot be drafted to fight in the army. And Likud will say, we don't agree with that. Our boys go in the army. And then the religious party will say, okay, so we won't be in your government. Find someone else to get 61. Yeah, but we need your numbers. We need your 8 seats to get 61. Well, nothing doing unless you give us our law. All right. But if we do that, then you have to vote, let's say, to annex Judea Samaria. And the religious party will say, well, that's okay. We probably would do it anyway. And everybody makes deals. On the other side, let's say the left wing says they sit with Yair Golan of Meretz, and they'll say something like, we'd like to have you in the government. He says, that's fine, but we want a law that you're allowed to bring bread into government hospitals on Pesach, because it's illegal to bring bread into Israeli hospitals. Private can do whatever it want, but the government hospitals cannot bring bread into the hospital on Pesach. So someone will say, well, that's not, we're trying to make peace with Hamas. What does it have to do with bread and Pesach? Well, that's what we want. All right. We'll make a law that you can bring bread into the hospital on Pesach if you agree that we leave Hamas in charge of Gaza and we have a complete withdrawal. And that's how they negotiate. And that's how eventually one side or the other gets 61 votes. In 1992, there were too many parties. And the majority of votes cast were for the right wing. But when you took out all of the small parties on the right wing that did not meet the threshold, of the votes that were left, the left wing got the majority. The left wing ran only 2 or 3 parties, and the right wing ran 12 parties. It's not like somebody called Mr. Right Wing made 12 parties. It's that 12 different guys had it in their heads. I want to have a party and get in. So they split their vote, like what's going to end up happening in New York, where Mamdani is going to get elected with less than 50% of the vote. Because Sliwa and Cuomo and Adams, no one wants to back down. So anyway, the election result was legal. No question that the votes were legal. They were counted properly. Everything followed the rules. No question. But the government had no moral authority because everyone knew that the people had in the majority voted right wing, although under cockamamie Israeli stuff, there was a left-wing government. Now, the left wing had not won an election for years, and they don't win anymore. Israel is too far to the right. So it's moderate right. Israel is kind of like what, like John McCain, Mitt Romney right wing. It's not very right wing. It's not Ted Cruz right wing or Trump populist right wing. It's what right wingers call rhino. It's like or George, like the Bushes, John McCain. That's the country. All in all, when you look at the whole mix, it's moderate right wing. And there's a certain amount on the extreme left. There are about 10 seats go to Arabs, forget about them. 10 seats to communists, Jews, and then about 20, 30 seats to socialist left. And then about 65 seats to the right wing. And that's Israel. In 1992, the left got a break. Even though the majority once again voted right wing and clearly would not make the mistake of too many parties next time, the left wing had a brief opening to get left wing stuff passed. And that's when Rabin put forth the Oslo, 1993 Oslo Agreement, by which Yasser Arafat ended up getting the Palestine Authority. In 1993, 62 votes did it. One of that pack of votes, 6 votes came from Aryeh Deri and the Shas Party, an Orthodox party of Sephardim. When the 1993 Oslo passed, they came to realize they were on the wrong side, and they pulled out. The 1993 Oslo is known as Oslo I, Roman numeral I. It needed part 2 for implementation. Shas, the Sephardic Orthodox, pulled out, leaving Rabin's government with only 56 seats, plus 11 Arab seats that were not in the government, but would present a majority if anyone tried to have a vote of no confidence. 2 years later, 1995, Rabin brought up for vote Oslo II, Roman numeral II, by which it would implement, that's 30 years ago. Until 30 years ago, Arafat did not have control of newspapers, television, education, the school system, raising children and teaching them, summer camps. That came in 95. When it came to vote, Shas refused to join Labor and to vote for it. Rabin did not have enough votes. Not only had he never had a majority of votes for his side, but eased in because of that stuff, too many parties, and he outright, with the people sitting in the parliament, had lost his majority. So what he did was he bought off 3 votes. There was a party that lasted through 2 governments, 2 elections under General Raphael Eitan, known as Raful. Raful was a very beloved right-wing general. He formed his own party, and he won 7 seats. He was a great general, but he did not understand politics. There is such a thing. When he won his 7 seats, who got the 7 seats? He got 1. Who were the other 6? It was his party. So he got to name the 6. So he picked 6 guys who had fought under his command in the army. They always had been loyal, privates, nobody important, not generals, not brilliant leaders. 6 people that fought with him in the army when he was their general, and they were loyal to him. So he named those 6, or 5 or 4 of them, and then 1 or 2 others, whatever. Yitzchak Rabin and the Labor Party set about to cut 3 of them out of the party into voting for Oslo to give Arafat his country. They offered, and it was received. They told these 3 people, these are 3 nobodies. They've never been back in the Knesset after. They're nobodies. He offered each of them, if you vote in favor of Oslo and giving Arafat a country, I will give you the following things. Number 1, I will make you a cabinet minister. That's like Rubio, like right now, that's like Marco Rubio is a cabinet minister. Pete Hegseth, like under Biden, Tony Blinken was cabinet minister. Attorney General Merrick Garland, cabinet minister. Lloyd Austin, defense secretary, cabinet minister. He said 3 of them, the first 3 that bite. I need 3. There are 6 of you. I'm not asking Ratan, General Ratan. The first 3 of you that bite, so you better act quickly, because if you're late to the party, someone else will get it. I'm offering you, number 1, you could be a minister in the government, which means you get a chauffeur-driven limousine for the duration of the government's term, plus your own office and staff. And most importantly of all Israeli cabinet ministers, no matter how limited their service is, get a lifetime pension that guarantees, even if they serve only 1 day as a minister in the cabinet, the rest of their lives, they will live a comfortable life, a materially comfortable life, a lifetime pension that guarantees them. So imagine a guy is a garbage man, and all his life he throws out the garbage, and he makes whatever the union gets him. And suddenly, for one moment in time, because he had the good fortune of be working for a ton as a private, can now become secretary of garbage, minister of garbage, last a month or a year till the government falls, and then for the rest of his life he's set. So Rabin got 3 of them, and they gave Rabin the 61 votes he needed to give Arafat his government. There was outrage in Israel. On the right, forget about it. Because again, it was all technically legal, unless it's illegal to bribe someone. But is it? What did I do? I offered him a secretary, a cabinet ministry, because he agreed with my idea. And he voted the way he believes. So there were massive rallies. There was no legitimacy. It's 30 years later, we don't remember. I remember. Some of us remember. There was no legitimacy. And here is the last part of this intro. I apologize for a super long intro. At least it's in English for those of you that prefer that language. And it makes everything else sensible. Otherwise, there are too many pieces of the puzzle that are missing. The nation was against giving Arafat the country, what today is called the Palestine Authority. And they knew it would lead to the creation of a so-called Palestine state. There were massive demonstrations of hundreds of thousands against it. It had no legitimacy because it passed with votes that people had not voted for. But Knesset members had been bought off. And the Shin Bet went to work, Shabak, to impact public opinion. And they started sending agents provocateurs, provocative agents, provoking, into the right wing to do horrible anti-Arab racist things and to do things that would get national revulsion against the right wing, to do racist anti-Arab things, kill innocent Arabs, and create an ongoing public message that the right wing in Israel is ready to create a Nazi state, like what the woke in America try to convince people Trump will do. They're going to take away your rights. They're going to be killing Arabs in the streets. Eventually, they're going to be killing Jews in the streets that they don't agree with. They're out of control. They are armed and dangerous. And the Shin Bet sent agents into the Israeli right wing to find weak spots. Who's the weak spots? Teenagers, young adults. They're the ones easier to rile up. Plus 171-year-old rabbi in Irvine. But that's who you rile up, the kids. And they gave them guns, and they convinced them to kill Arabs or to burn Arab houses. Just Arabs. And there would be coverage in the media, and Israeli public opinion started moving away from the right wing toward the left wing. And that's what the Shin Bet, the Shabak, did. They coordinated with media. Media would not give public coverage of massive demonstrations against Oslo Accords. They blacked out the story, except when there would be a rally where they would turn into a riot, and they would cover the racists at the riot. Now, the worst of all was a guy named Avishai Raviv. Avishai Raviv was an agent provocateur of the Shin Bet, the Shabak, and he provoked people to shoot Arabs. In order to seem more responsible and stable, they had him marry someone. They told him it didn't matter who, just marry her. Find someone, tell her you love her, have some kids with her, and marry her. We'll support whatever costs you're taking on in your marriage. He was not a successful financial guy. So he got married to a woman, didn't know she was being used by the Shin Bet. As soon as his assignment was over, he was told he could divorce her, and he did. He convinced people like the Kahalani Brothers. And I want to thank one of our regulars, Asaf Gozlan, sent me some material on that. I can't get into all of that. There's too much to cover. But in the film, you will find the story the way that the filmmaker presents it. And I thank Asaf again for what he shared with me. But the way the filmmaker presents it is that Raviv got them guns, rifles, to shoot 2 Arabs. And they didn't know that the rifles had blank bullets. So the Arabs miraculously survived. And the Kahalani, the minute after they pulled the trigger, from out of nowhere, the Shin Bet showed up, arrested them for attempted murder, and threw him in jail for like 15 years. And something like that was done with Yigal Amir. Raviv was in charge of handling him. A law student, hot-headed Sephardi, perfect stereotype, and people knew he was going around telling people, Amir, one of these days he's going to kill Rabin and stop the Oslo Accords. And Avishai Raviv, constantly, he got close to him, and he handled him, and he started mocking him privately, not publicly. You're a big talker. You're a big talker, aren't you? You're going to kill Rabin. I haven't seen you do squat. You don't have the gonads. Here, I'll prove it to you. Here's a gun. Here's a gun. You can't afford a gun? Here's a gun. It's loaded. No, go ahead. Let's see what a big star you are. And he incited him. And in November 1995, at a mass rally by the left, intended to counter the mass rally to the right, Yigal Amir got really close and was about to pull the gun, the trigger, but unexpectedly, and unlike the Kahalani brothers, at the last moment he changed the bullets. And he fired 2 shots, 3 shots, and he killed Rabin. The title of this film, Shabak Knew, K-N-E-W. It's a 45-minute film. It was shown, it's gotten over a million, I think over 2 million views. And when you read the comments, nobody thinks that's a conspiracy movie. That's the real thing. I shared in my announcements an article by Rabbi Stephen Przansky, one of my dear colleagues and friends. He talks about it. I wrote about it. Many, many have written about it. Deep state. Here we go. First, this share. Share. Here we go. Take this off. Okay. The 1992 elections. Rabin got 44 seats and Shulamit Aloni 12. That was the left, 56 seats on the left. That's not 60. On the right, Shamir got 32. Raful Eitan got 8, it's 40. Zavulun Hammer, Orthodox right wing, 6, makes 46. Aryeh Deri, Sephardic right wing, 6, makes 52. Rav Shapira of UTJ, 4, makes 56. Rechavam Ze'evi, later assassinated by an Arab, 3, made 59. So there were 59 on the right, 56 on the left. Deri, and then there were 5 left over, Arabs. Tawfiq Ziad, and he's best known for, and Abdul Wahab Darafsha. Okay. So the left had 56 votes. Deri gave them 62 in 93. But when it came time for 95 implementation, Deri dropped out. And in fact, they had so many other parties. And many of the parties, look how many parties' votes were wasted. Tehiyah, and just so many parties wasted votes. Okay. I told you about the 3 guys who were on Raful Eitan's right-wing party. They were elected with the right-wing party. They were given 3 of his 7 seats, and then they sold out. The one who's most interesting, all 3 sold out. They were formed in 94. They were bought off. And they had a disagreement with the party leader, Eitan. The disagreement was they didn't agree to continue on the things they were elected. So Segev was made Minister of Energy. What became later in life, 30 years have passed. The guy sold out principles in life just for a Knesset seat. What became of this bastard? Let's take a look. Gonen Segev, former Minister of Energy Infrastructure, member of Knesset, and pediatrician. In 2005, 10 years after selling out in Oslo, he was convicted of forgery, credit card fraud, and attempting to smuggle drugs. 14 years later, he was convicted of spying for Iran and sentenced to 11 years in prison. So he'll be there for another 5 years. This is the bastard whose vote gave Arafat the country that's technically not a country. You have what you have. Here we go.
Libby, we love our channel I-14 here. I can't tell you.
So let's start with the deep state. Do you see any similarities between the deep state in Israel and the U.S.?
The deep state, you know, it's such a passive phrase, isn't it, to explain your phony Supreme Court. Your Supreme Court reminds me of the old Soviet Politburo. They appoint themselves. They talk loudly with righteous indignation. They pretend they're actually doing something legal. They wrap themselves in black robes and claim to be doing justice. And they've decided to seize power. And this has been going on now, as you know, since the 1990s, from the people. The people of Israel do not live in a democracy anymore. They live in a judicial tyranny. It is that simple. We've never seen anything like this in Western civilization. In fact, there is nothing like this in Western civilization. Your court is worse than any court that I've ever known because it pretends to be promoting democracy. It pretends to be using judicial review as we do in the United States and other countries. It is not. It is a tyranny, and Israel has the most aggressive, iron-fisted judicial tyranny really on the planet.
Could the Trump administration refuse to work with the Shin Bet chief, Ronen Bar, if the court forces the Israeli government to keep him?
If I were the head of our FBI, I'd want nothing to do with the guy. First of all, he's a complete failure. The greatest attack on the state of Israel with the greatest consequences, certainly in modern times, somehow this guy missed it. Well, how the hell do you have the equivalent of an FBI director, domestic security guy? Oops, I missed it. Oops, I didn't tell the prime minister about it. And then you have your Politburo that pretends to be a Supreme Court that says it's anti-democratic if the prime minister of the state of Israel decides to remove this incompetent buffoon. So we on the Supreme Court decide that for now we're going to stay it because we don't want the prime minister to have all this power where he can decide who actually reports to him. He should resign because he is a disgrace. He will go down in history as a disgrace. And I can't speak for our government, but if I were our FBI director, I'd want absolutely nothing to do with him. Why? Because he's a complete screw-up. That's why.
If the court were to place Prime Minister Netanyahu in a state of incapacity, is there a possibility that the Trump administration would not recognize the change of government in Israel?
So if the Supreme Court does that, I can tell you on my platforms, and I won't be alone, there's going to be massive condemnation, a complete humiliation of the state of Israel by this court. This court is defying the whole reason that Israel was founded in the first place. The left in Israel is as crazy as the left in the United States. They would rather the left in Israel weaken the state of Israel against its real enemies if they can take out the prime minister and appoint their own. That's how sick this is. Benjamin Netanyahu, in free countries, is considered heroic.
Mark, from a U.S. perspective, how does it look when an appointment official, in this case, the Attorney General, backed by the court, forces the government to follow his directives?
Your Attorney General would be very comfortable being the Attorney General for any despot on the face of the earth, because that's what she is. She's an attorney for a... well, who the hell is she an attorney for? I mean, is she the attorney for the Supreme Court? Is she attorney for the people? Is she the attorney for the government? I mean, imagine having power like this. Again, whatever happened to separation of powers? Whatever happened to the fact that you have an executive, you have a legislative, you have a judicial? What is happening to our beloved Israel? What's happening is it's unraveling from a representative democracy to a centralized tyranny. You have an attorney general who's supposed to have a lane and stay in that lane. Literally, Libby, Israel has none of these things anymore. It's frightening.
So do you think it's time for people to take to the streets?
There needs to be a groundswell of people in Israel. You know, you've got non-governmental organizations in America and in Europe spending millions of dollars funding the left in Israel. You have Ehud Barak and other reprobates were prime minister for about 14 minutes, and then they want to be prime minister again. They're extremely jealous of Netanyahu and his government, his longevity. I don't see as many people in the streets for the good guys as I see for the bad guys. The people need to start speaking out. They need to start showing up. They need to start making demands of their own, just like the kooks on the left.
Can we trust President Trump not to strike a weak deal with Iran, but only one that fully dismantles their nuclear program?
I think the likelihood of there being a bad deal is very low under Donald Trump, because he's like the king of the deal makers. And we're not dealing with Biden, you know, who's bouncing into padded walls and all the rest of it. Donald Trump's going to take a very close look at this thing. He said Iran will not get nukes. I believe him. I know that we have the right prime minister and the right president at the right time. So I have to believe the right thing will be done. These are two tremendous, not just leaders in America and Israel, but world leaders who are smart like foxes and who are tough as hell. And I think that's why they get along so well. So that allows me to sleep at night.
Mark Levin, thank you so much for this interview.
It's always a great honor. I love speaking to you folks and to the people of Israel. God bless you.
Tzvika Klein, shalom.
Hi, Yoni.
Editor-in-Chief, Jerusalem Post. So you were interrogated by the police. First of all, a few words about the interrogation, what you went through, the experience.
So basically, I was asking to
You catch it. He's the publisher of the Jerusalem Post.
for questioning at the beginning, basically to give information about what is called "quote unquote" Qatar Gate, claims of connections between people who work with the Prime Minister and supposedly or whatever claimed to be paid by, connected to Qatar.
This is following a report, a story.
So basically,
story
right?
you did in Qatar.
Yeah. So a year ago, exactly in April 2024, I went to Qatar. I was invited by the government there, and I wrote two articles about it. Published it in the Jerusalem Post. In order to keep objectivity, we had at least two articles. I kind of brought their take, and then we brought two articles, bashing them.
It's not surprising when you're interviewing Qatari officials, you're bringing their story.
100%. That's the way I see journalism. And even the week later, actually, interestingly, we had a columnist who published a column tearing me to pieces, and my staff was like, "We shouldn't publish this." I was like, "We should publish it because we're a newspaper. We're not, no one bought us, no one paid us, no one, whatever. Like we do what we think is right and what we think is objective as much as possible."
So just recently you understood, or you saw the bigger picture? You started connecting the dots?
So this is it's a lot more of a complicated story, but basically people who I was in touch with regarding this trip, but also in general, like there were other items that had to do with Qatar, that had to do with this. Some of them either were at the time working with the Prime Minister, or in the past were working with the Prime Minister. Were people totally frank about who they're representing and what they were, if they were actually
interest behind
exactly.
motives.
And now, obviously, everyone, like we are as journalists, we're vessels for delivering information, and everyone will be. People use us, quote unquote, and we use people, right? It doesn't sound amazing, but basically meaning everyone has an interest, whether it is a publicist, a lobbyist, people, politicians, they want to get their message across, right? So that's kind of what happened. And basically, and I was interrogated about being in relation with those people.
So it began as a questioning,
right?
And then it became an interrogation. You became a suspect.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look at that in terms of freedom of speech, freedom of speech, of journalism?
It was very difficult. Personally, also, my wife was abroad, and I was supposed to pick my kids up, and they wouldn't let me out. And again, the allegations were, being in touch with a foreign agent, mm-hmm. which in general is something that most of us journalists, definitely those who are working in covering international issues. My phone was taken from me and it still hasn't been given back to me, but there isn't even a warrant. They took it without a warrant, and I've since seen leaks from my phone, leaks from the interrogation in Israeli media, in Hebrew media, about the interrogation. And
you're saying here clearly it's not coming from my side, it's coming from the authorities?
Well, it can't come from my side because I don't have the phone, mm-hmm. and I couldn't have recorded anything, or my memory is not that amazing, and I also had no interest because like those narratives were not necessarily so positive towards me. So there's a really, and luckily, I think it took a while, but I feel that I've received a lot of support from right and left.
But how do you look at that? The fact that these transcripts were leaked by authorities, probably.
It's very frustrating. I think it's a very big problem. It didn't begin with me. Unfortunately, I'm sure it's not going to stop there.
But you suddenly understand how other people go through.
I understand what other people go through, but also I told them, when I saw they leaked, they didn't even leak, they just published that, I was being interrogated. I said, I want to give you information in order for this, if my information is helpful, and I'll give you any information I have in order for you to be able to find the truth. And if someone, did things that are illegal, then you could arrest them and do whatever you want. But I also said, you keep on leaking everything. So why should I trust you if I, and give you this information? What?
At what point did you say that?
After I started understanding that things were being leaked.
And you got no answer and no response yet from the authorities about these leaks, right?
Nope.
Now, how do you look at the bigger picture? You're hoping that your story is coming to an end, but this Qatar gate, this whole issue is not going anywhere, right?
I can't speak about the details of the interrogation or evidence that I was displayed during my time, 2 days of being interrogated for 12 hours almost. But it's not an invented story. There are issues here that are problematic. I don't know what is considered illegal or not. Even if we put legality aside, ethically, morally, nationally, security-wise, there are many elements here that are problematic and should be interrogated and should be looked into as much as possible. And those who broke the law or who violated many privacy or issues, etc., have to be prosecuted.
Finally, you're back home with your kids. What do you tell them when they ask you, Abba, where were you?
At the beginning, I said that I'm helping the police, and they're like, "Why can't you leave the house?" I was like, "Well, because my phone's broken, so I have to be close to the landline in case they're looking for me, because I'm helping them, and the police are good people." And whatever. It was.
When you grow up, you'll explain the complexity.
Some of them are more into politics than others, even amongst twins. So
it's a complex story.
Yeah, definitely.
Tzvika Klein, editor-in-chief at Jerusalem Post. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yoni.
ראש הממשלה ניסה בתחילת השבוע לבטל גם את העדות היום, אולם לאחר שהשופטים קבעו שלא הציג כל סיבה מוצדקת לכך, יומיים אחרי הפגישה עם טראמפ, לא הגיש עוד בקשה והגיע. אלא שכבר
So he had just met with Trump for 2 days, and when he flew back, he landed in the airport, and the car took him straight to court.
בתחילת יום העדות אפשר היה להבין מדברי סנגורו לאן הדברים הולכים. ראש הממשלה רק נחת לא מזמן, הוא עייף מאוד, לא ישן כל הלילה. יש אינטרס שהאדם לא יהיה יתרות עיניים. ואחרי שהתשתית הונחה, זמן קצר לאחר מכן נתניהו מבקש בעצמו את קיצור הדיון והשופטים מסכימים. וכך העדות נמשכת 3 שעות בלבד, פחות ממחצית יום הדיונים הקבוע. ראש הממשלה, האם תצייתו לפסיקת בג"ץ בנוגע לראש השב"כ? למעשה יותר משזאת הייתה עדות עם שאלות ותשובות, זה הנאום אני מאשים של נתניהו. גם על מה שכינה הדלפות מגמתיות ומתוזמנות, במטרה להשפיע על החקירה. משחק פוליטי, זה נועד לפגוע בי, להציג אותי כעבריין, וזה מטה בחירות. ובעיקר על חקירות של אנשים בסביבתו. כך לדוגמה סיפר שדרשו מארי הרו רשימת דברים פסולים שנעשו בלשכה במסגרת המגעים להסדר עד מדינה. זאת סחיטה באיומים. אני מרגיש שאני במזרח גרמניה או בטהרן. מה זה? איזה משטר אפל זה? ואחרי שדיברו על עורך דין שמרון, מסתכל נתניהו לספסל התביעה ומרים את הקול. אתם חיפשתם אותי, הפרתם כל נורמה, עשיתם דברים שלא יעשו בשם שלטון החוק. הצגתם את עצמכם כשומרי סף. איזה שומרי סף? ראש ממשלה התייחסות כלשהי בכל זאת? נתניהו מתייחס לשורת בכירים בעבר ובהווה במערכת אכיפת החוק, וטוען שהאשימו אותו האשמות שווא. זה ריקבון עמוק מאוד וזיהום החקירה מלמטה עד למעלה. לשאלת השופט אישרה ההגנה שמדובר בקו של הגנה מן הצדק. במילים אחרות, בונים בטענה עתידית שיש לבטל את האישום, בטענה שהחקירה והתיק סותרים מהותית כללי צדק והגינות. התביעה הבהירה שההגנה מן הצדק לא מתבססת על תחושות או סברות של נאשמים. השופטים הדגישו שהם עוד לא מגבשים דעה. הדיון הבא אחרי פסח, הרבה אחרי הלוז המקורי לסיום העדות.
And only in Israel, you've got the Prime Minister was symbolically cleaning chametz and cleaning out the deep state. This is in Israel right before Pesach, the Prime Minister doing bedikat chametz and also looking to clean out the Shin Bet. And I said I didn't sleeping on the job.
טוב, סיימנו את הניקיונות לפני הפסח, ויהיו גם ניקיונות אחרי הפסח, בעזרת השם. חג שמח.
94 פצועים, 13 פצועים במצב...
Okay, here we go. Again, it's got Hebrew titles. This is the main film. Hebrew titles. Amazon auto-generates Hebrew titles off the Hebrew. Then Amazon also auto-generates through Google Translation or something. I'll talk when I don't like the translation's accuracy. This is a Sarto shel Shimon Riklin's film HaShabak Yoda. The Shabak, the Shin Bet knew. Those are people chanting, this is terror, this is not peace. That's the filmmaker, Shimon Riklin. Okay, I think Cuban, I think I'll do the translating. They're taking the word korban and they're picking up Cuban. Korban means sacrifice. Okay, this is a right-wing demonstration. We don't want to be sacrificial lambs for peace. Jews being buried because of terror that came out of. That sign says, these are the names of people who are the sacrifices of Oslo. May their blood be avenged. People that the Oslo Accords caused to be killed by Arafat having the power to exercise terrorism unabated.
שקמתי פה, נקודת מחאה, שבה הייתי יום וליל. אחרי כל פיגוע התקנתי את השלט עם שמות הנרצחים, נרצחי אוסלו, שהצבתי ליד...
I created a sign that lists all the victims of Oslo.
הכביש. יום אחד פניתי ליהוד שהיה חברי ללימודים באוניברסיטת תל אביב, ועבד כמאבטח בשב"כ, פה בבלפור. ואמרתי לו, תשמע, לדעתי הולכים לרצוח את ראש הממשלה.
I met with someone at the height of this period back in 1995 and said, I am telling you, there is a plot afoot to assassinate Prime Minister Rabin. I went to Tel Aviv University, reported to them, and they blew me off.
תשמרו עליו. יהוד אמר לי, תודה על ההתראה, אבל זה בסדר. העניינים בשליטה.
The guy to whom I warned at the Shabak said to me, we know about it. Don't worry about it. It's all under control.
אל תדאג. שתקתי וחזרתי לנקודה שלי. אחרי שבועיים ניגשתי שוב ליהוד ואמרתי לו, תשמע, התחושה שלי עדיין לא טובה, ירצחו את רבין.
2 weeks later, I went back to Shabak and reported, hey, look, I'm a reporter for the media. I hear stuff. I'm telling you, there are people planning to kill Rabin.
הוא חזר ואמר לי, זה בסדר. העניינים בשליטה, אל
He responded, everything's fine. We have it all under control. Don't worry.
תדאג.
ממשלת ישראל מודיעה בתדהמה.
חצי שנה אחרי, כששמעתי שרבין נורה בכיכר, הייתי בהלם.
6 months later, when I heard that Rabin would be addressing a massive demonstration in Tel Aviv, I was really I was baffled what to do, because shortly after he was killed, I was summoned to be interviewed.
הרי ממחי הרצח זומנתי לחקירה במגרש הרוסים. שאל אותי החוקר, איך ידעת שהולכים לרצוח את רבין?
The chief investigator asked me, how did you know so well in advance that Rabin would be assassinated? I looked at him and said,
הסתכלתי עליו ואמרתי לו, השאלה הנכונה היא, איך זה שאתם לא ידעתם?
I responded to him, the real question to ask is how you didn't know. The title of the film, Shabak knew. This was Begin's most famous speech, a campaign rally.
בשביל לנסות להבין מה הוביל לרגע שבו רבין נרצח, צריך לחזור אחורה לבחירות בשנת 70.
In order to understand the context in which Rabin was assassinated, we have to look back to the revolutionary results of the election of 1977.
כן, כנראה לא פחות מאשר...
This guy was the Walter Cronkite, the main Israeli news anchor in those days. And here he is announcing that it looks, there's not, on election night, it looks like we're witnessing something that is no less than a revolution.
מהפכה חלה בישראל.
אדוני הוא...
For 30 years, from 48 to 77, Begin was the leader of the opposition in every single election and lost 30 years in a row. And yet his party put him up as the candidate again in 77, and here he won. And there is Begin the day after the election, or when he took office, addressing the Knesset, looking at the Labor Party Knesset members and saying, you were so convinced that you're going to form the next coalition once again, weren't you? You got so used to governing this country, you're just in shock. Well, get used to it.
כשהימין מנצח שוב בבחירות 81, השמאל מתחיל להבין שמדובר במגמה.
In 1981, 4 years later, when the next elections came, the left realized that may not have been a one-time aberration, but perhaps there's been a change in the Israeli electorate.
לכן, כדי להבטיח את חזרתו לשלטון, הוא פונה בסתר לכיוון חדש.
Shimon Peres led the Labor Party and strategized in a new way for the 81 election.
מחמוד עבאס, אבו מאזן, מי שניהל את המשא ומתן מן הצד הפלסטיני.
The same Mahmoud Abbas that we see now, the head of the Palestine Authority, now he's 89, and this is like 40 years ago. And Peres determined that we can't beat Begin and the Likud if we continue the old strategy. We have to come up with something dramatic to win back the voters. And the strategy was, we are going to endorse the creation of a Palestine state, and that will convince the public that we are the party that will bring them lasting peace.
פלסטיני באוסלו מספר בעזרת מסמכים ופרוטוקולים על מפגשים בין נציגי אש"ף לבין נציגי מפלגת העבודה לטרפד את המשא ומתן שהתחיל במדריד כדי להביא להפלת הליכוד ופנייה של מפלגת העבודה לאש"ף.
אש"ף הוציא הודעה רשמית בבחירות 1962 לערביי ישראל להצביע על מפלגת העבודה.
The PLO under Arafat undertook its own strategy in 1992 to help Paris beat Begin. They wanted Paris to win. They didn't want to have to deal with Begin. So they started dropping hints that if Paris and the Labour Party would win, they might be ready to make permanent peace with Israel. But not if Begin wins.
מפלגת העבודה לא רצתה שיצטייר כאילו היא מקיימת מגעים עם אש"ף, עם ארגון טרור. היא מאוד נזהרה שלא יפורסם דבר, כי זה היה פוגע בשמה לקראת הבחירות שהיו. מה שאש"ף נתן למפלגת העבודה, זה את הקריאה לערביי ישראל להצביע בבחירות במפלגת העבודה.
The Labour Party felt uncomfortable revealing to the Israeli public that they, the Labour Party, were conducting secret meetings with the PLO for political purposes to strategize. You want to talk about Russian collusion, to strategize for the 92 elections. So what the PLO did was they tried by making in their public announcements, sending a word to Arab voters in Israel that it would be good in the eyes of Arafat if Arab voters would cast votes on behalf of Paris and the Labour Party.
ובתמורה מפלגת העבודה הכירה באש"ף ולא בהענקת השטחים כמי שמייצג את הבעיה הפלסטינית. ערביי ישראל קיבלו את המסר.
The Arabs of Israel got the message and voted in larger numbers than before for Labour, giving them more seats.
כן, בבחירות 92.
And there is that anchor again, 1992, and he's reporting on election night that the polls are now in, and it looks like another revolution.
על פי מדגם הטלוויזיה, מהפך.
ישראל מחכה לרבין, יש הסכמה לאומית.
That Israel has elected Rabin and the Labour Party is back in power.
בהמשך לדיל עם אש"ף לפני בחירות 92, בהובלת רבין, חתמה ישראל עם ערפאת על הסכם שבמהלכו היא מוותרת על שטחים בלב הארץ.
Upon Rabin's getting elected, the Labour Party met with Arafat and they signed an agreement, I assume you're talking about Oslo 93, indicating that Israel would be ready to give Arafat his own country.
הטרור אש"ף קיבל שטח, כסף וכלי נשק.
In addition to getting land, Arafat was given money, not personally, but the so-called Palestine Authority was given money, and Israel gave them weapons. That is, Rabin gave Israeli weapons to Arafat so that he would have a police force that could enforce law.
תמורת הבטחה מעורפלת על שלום.
Ladies and gentlemen, the time for peace has come.
עכשיו קלינטון מסדרת לחיצת היד.
בפועל, ישראל קיבלה אש, הרוגים ותמרות עשן.
פיגוע קשה.
In reality, rather than receiving peace, Israel received fire and death.
הבוקר בתל אביב.
Arab, an intifada, Arab bus bombings.
הנורא הזה הראה בשערי...
בפיצוץ מטען החבלה הבוקר בצומת בית ליד נהרגו לפחות 18 בני אדם. 94 פצועים, 13 פצועים במצב קשה.
This all happened in the aftermath of signing the Oslo Accords.
מערך חירום לקליטת עשרות הפצועים. הפיצוץ אירע הבוקר סמוך לשם. שוב הגעתם.
היה הפתעה מוחלטת, הציבור היה כולו היה בהלם. גם
Moshe Feiglin is one of the right-wing political individuals in Israel, and he says that the country was in trauma and shock at the time, even the left. People could not believe how after the Oslo Accords were signed in 93, how the annoyances of Arab terrorism had exploded into a complete helem, a complete, just everything out of control.
משום שהוא ניצח על חודו של כל, רק בזכות זה שהבטיח שלא יהיה שום דיבור עם אש"ף, או על ירושלים.
Rabin had campaigned saying that he is one of the most right-wing on the left, and he will not give in to Arafat, and he will not give up land to Arafat. That's how he had campaigned. It's safe to vote against Begin for the left, because we're not going to give up to them. And then he got elected, and right away, there he was. He got those three Knesset guys to vote for him.
על רמת הגולן, אלה היה שלושת ההבטחות המפורסמות של הבחירות.
He made 3 specific promises that no land will be given up, no compromise in Jerusalem, no compromise in the Golan Heights.
שלו בלי זה הוא לא היה סיכוי שהיה זוכה בכלל בבחירות.
הייתי הצגה ישראלית בחדר שלו, בכנסת. הייתי בקשר רצוף איתו על כל מה שקשור ביהודה ושומרון, בבעיה הפלסטינית.
Direct taxation and
Yossi Sarid was the most left-wing party. He was the head of the most left-wing party in the Knesset at the time.
במקום לרוץ לרמאללה, צריך לרוץ לאופקים. אז הוא התעצבן, וסילק אותי, גירש אותי. אני כל כך הצטערתי שהוא לא מסוגל לשמוע.
אז התחילה זה ארץ ישראל לסוף.
Now this is that general I mentioned, Raful Eitan, who won 7 seats and from whom 3 of his members sold out and went to the other side. He had warned not to give anything to Arafat and the Arabs, that they intend to kill us.
של הערבים. הם לא השתנו, הם שינו את התכסיסים.
I warned that they haven't changed and they've simply changed their timetables.
הם שינו את לוח הזמנים.
הרי אוסלו הביא מלחמה, לא שלום.
Actually, Oslo and those agreements brought war and death, not peace.
הרי אוסלו הביא שפך דמים שלא נודע כמותו לפניו.
Oslo brought bloodshed, the likes of which we had never seen before.
אנחנו יושבים כאן מרחק קצר מאוד ממה שהיה קפה סברו, מי שזוכר, מה שהלך כאן בירושלים.
For those who remember what went on then, people remember the bombing of a Sbarro restaurant, but it was so much more. For those who remember what was going on then in Jerusalem, buses exploding.
אוטובוסים מתפוצצים. בכל פרמטר שלא תמדוד, כך 20 שנה לפני אוסלו, 20 שנה אחרי אוסלו, תראה שמספר ההרוגים קפץ. תקציב הביטחון שאמור היה לרדת עלה פי כמה וכמה. פתאום יש לך טילים על מרכז הארץ.
Every single data point got worse. When you looked at pre-Oslo and post-Oslo, not only killings, but we were told that the economy would get better once war came into an end. In fact, the economy broke down. Likewise, for the first time, missiles were shot into the center of Israel that never happened before.
מה שלא היה מעולם, העורף שלנו תמיד היה בטוח בכל המלחמות.
So there were right-wing demonstrations in Jerusalem and elsewhere. Rabin, go home. Rabin, go home.
הכרות של מנחם בגין לא נראה קהל רב ועצום כזה בהפגנות הימין.
The slogan, the nation did not sign, the nation did not sign. And there were massive demonstrations against Oslo and giving Arafat a country.
אם כן, בשעה זו כבר מפגינים המתנחלים ותומכיהם בצמתים רבים ברחבי הארץ.
בהפגנות התפתחו עימותים אלימים בין המשטרה למפגינים.
זה היה מדהים. עד כמה מהר התקשורת במקום...
It is amazing how rapidly the mass media in Israel stopped asking questions and investigating and reporting, and instead became the authors of a new narrative that supported Oslo just blindly without asking any questions.
את השאלות הקשות ולדווח מאותן הפגנות מול ממשלה שמפרה את החוזה הכי בסיסי שהיה לה עם הציבור, נעמדה לטובת הממשלה, ומי שיצא להפגין, או שלא ראה את עצמו בכלל, לשמע שאין שום הפגנות וכל העם בעד.
And whereas during the Begin years, public demonstrations got tremendous coverage and endorsement by the media, now they were substantially blacked out, and coverage was very hostile towards the demonstrators.
או שראה את עצמו כאלים, מציגים אותו כאלים, מציגים אותו כהזוי.
משה פייגלין נעצר אתמול בצומת גן הוורדים ונאשם
They show him, for example, being arrested at a demonstration.
התפרעות במהלך ההפגנה. בגזר דינה כתבה השופטת אביטל בגנר כי פייגלין הפר את החוק בצורה חמורה ביותר שסיכנה את הציבור וכנסה אותו ב10,000 שקלים ומאסר על תנאי למשך 3 שנים אם יחזור שוב על עבירה זו.
מתנהלת כאן דרמה גדולה כשהמתנחלים פשוט השתלטו על הצמתים.
עדיין
The reportage is that it's really dangerous out here at these demonstrations. The settlers are taking control over the country. They're a threat to democracy, and they're taking control of the cross sections of the roads.
התקשויות עם המשטרה?
כן, חיים, ההפגנה הזאת הולכת ונעשית יותר ויותר אלימה. אנחנו חשבנו...
This demonstration, the reporter says, is just getting more and more violent, and these people are reaching a point that they're about to explode.
שלום למיכאל פויה מזאת ארצנו.
שלום, ערב טוב, מיכאל פויה.
פויה, סליחה.
כן.
אז אתם האלימים ואתם המסיתים?
So here's reportage of the demonstration where that guy is being asked, you're the insiders, you're the ones creating violence.
הם בגדו בתפקיד המרכזי של
They were traitors to the single most important purpose of journalism in any democracy.
תקשורת בכל דמוקרטיה. להביא את קולם של העשוקים.
It was their responsibility as journalists to convey to the public the voices of the disadvantaged, to let people know what the masses were complaining about.
להביא את קולם של הרמוסים, להביא את קולם של מי שחשים שגנבו אותם, גנבו להם את המדינה, לפעול עם העם נגד עריצות השלטון.
The demonstrators were chanting, enough widows, enough orphans. You are the government of blood. And the focus was to show that the demonstrators were violent and fighting the cops rather than to focus on their cause. This is Rabin. He was asked, well, what do you make of these demonstrators? And he says, Hem lo mezizim li v'hem lo yazizu li. They don't impact me, and they won't impact me. Rabin begins to implement the Oslo Agreement, and Sahal, the IDF, begins to assign their forces to reduce their protective forces around the Jewish communities in Judea, Samaria, and to leave them unprotected. They started as part of Rabin's plan to get the Jews out of Judea, Samaria. The IDF were instructed to stand down, depart, and stop protecting the people living there.
הקצינים בשטח הבינו שאוטוטו מפנים את קריית ארבע, אוטוטו מפנים את חברון, חבל להשקיע מאמצים.
The leaders of the government began to feel we're closing down in Judea, Samaria. We're going to close down the community of Hebron, of Kiryat Arba. There's no point in providing any more services for them because we're going to close them down.
הולך להיות פה שלום, ולכן היית נוסע מפה לירושלים, לא היה צבא, לא היה כוחות.
Suddenly there were no Israel Defense Forces to be found anywhere on the road between Jerusalem and Hebron.
לא היית רואה ג'יפ אחד לפנים.
Not a single jeep.
ג'יפ אחד לא היית רואה לפנים. וכל זה קרה בעקבות הסכמי אוסלו.
This was all part of the Oslo Accords.
במשך שנתיים יורים עלינו. אתה יכול לראות את החורים פה בקרוון.
For 2 years they started shooting at us. Remember, Oslo was 93, implementation 95. They started shooting at us and...
והצבא מתעסק עם המקבילים.
היו פה בין 40 ל-50 פיגועים של נרצחים. ואני אומר לך, אנשים חששו לצבא.
There were 40 to 50 different attacks and injured people, wounded, injured, killed.
מהבתים. אנשים עזבו את הקריה מרוב פחד.
And people started leaving. Jews started leaving. I don't use the term Jewish settlements. I refer to them as communities. Just as I don't refer to West Bank, I refer to Judea Samaria. So Jews started leaving some of the communities in Judea Samaria when the IDF was getting pulled out and no one was protecting from Arabs shooting and bombing at them. I had a woman who worked as like a staff person in Gush Etzion at the nursery.
אישה שעבדה גננת בגוש עציון, אמרתי לה, למה את עוזבת?
I asked her, why are you leaving?
אמרתי לי, אני יוצאת מהקריה, אני עושה פיפי במכנסיים.
She said, I have to leave here, I'm starting to urinate in my trousers.
היו בדרכם לקריית ארבע שם הם מתגוררים. מכונית המחבלים ובה 4 לפחות עקפה אותם כאן, ותוך כדי העקיפה פתחו באש אוטומטית לעבר המכונית הישראלית.
אני אגיד לך עוד יותר מזה. פואד, שהיה שר השיכון.
I'll tell you even more than that. There was a guy named Fuad. He was the Arab government's housing minister.
נתן תמריצים לאלה שעוזבים את הקריה בהשתתפות בשכר דירה בירושלים במקומות אחרים. רק תעזוב את קריית ארבע.
Efforts were made to pay people, Jews, to move out of Kiryat Arba, which is alongside Hebron. Move to Jerusalem, move somewhere, and they started paying people to leave.
בעד חרסינה החלו להתארגן עשרות משפחות המבקשות לעזוב את עיר האבות למקום בטוח יותר.
They started gathering. There was tens of Jewish families lined up to be assisted by the government to move out of their communities in Judea, Samaria, to safer places.
נחום מוס למשל, שהכרת אותו, שמעת עליו, גר בחברון ביחד עם אוחיון, נרצחו בצומת הזכוכית.
And so people started moving out, and the news was just terrible. 2 murdered, 5 injured during a bloody attack in Hebron.
הוא היה בן יחיד. הוא היה בן יחיד.
The one who was killed was the only son of that family.
הפיגוע בחברון מובאים 3 הפצועים תושבי קריית ארבע, בית החולים הדסה.
הצבא מגיע לשם, אני מגיע לשם גם. הצבא ממשיך לתת לערבים לנסוע כרגיל על הכביש. אני אומר, תגיד, אם השתגעתם?
After a shooting in Hebron that saw 2 Jews killed and others wounded, he says he's on the road and he sees Arabs are driving up and down the highway freely, no disruption or obstacles, and Jews are afraid to be driving.
צריכו פה 2 יהודים, אתם נותנים להם זהו? הוצאת את כל קריית ארבע, חסמנו את הכביש. לא, אמרנו, אם יהודים לא...
So we said, if Jews are not allowed to drive on this freeway or highway or road, neither will Arabs, and we came out to the street and we blocked the traffic.
יכולים לנסוע פה, גם ערבים לא ייסעו פה. הם התנהלו איתנו כאילו אנחנו ברבבים במטבח. אני לא יודע איך אפשר לתת לערבים להמשיך לנסוע במקום שנרצחו פה יהודים.
I couldn't understand how they're allowing Arabs freedom to travel up and down and all around in an area where they're shooting at Jews on the roads.
איך אפשר לא לעשות עוצר, לא לעצור, לא לבדוק, לא כלום. הכל היה פה הפקרות.
Everything here was complete chaos and complete abandonment of defense responsibility.
אני תמה שהצבא לא היה בזמן.
כלומר?
כלומר, הצבא יודע שהתושבים יורדים כל יום שישי, באותם שעות.
This was a horrible Erev Shabbat. One Friday afternoon, an Arab snipers started shooting at Jews in Hebron as they were leaving prayer services and walking down the main road to their homes after Shabbat evening services, and they were just like sitting ducks. And the guy's saying, it is amazing there was not a single IDF soldier anywhere in the area. There once used to be adequate protection, and they left the area. The Arabs knew that there's no IDF protection. They can shoot at people as they're leaving synagogue Friday evening, and they know they're going to be coming out at such and such time, and there was no protection.
בדרך כלל הצבא נמצא פה, הצבא הגיע באיחור.
זרקו עלינו אבנים, ואנחנו מדווחים למשטרה ולצבא שזורקים אבנים, אז אני מקבל תשובה, אין כוחות.
The Arabs were standing in the street throwing heavy rocks at us, not pebbles, heavy, perilous rocks at us. We would call the phone numbers for the army protection, and they would say, sorry, we don't have enough men available.
אחרי 5 דקות אני אומר, חבר'ה, קריית ארבע יצא, זורק את הבנים על הערבים.
So what I did was, after 5 minutes of that, I called again, and I said, hi, I was just passing by, and I saw Jews throwing rocks at Arabs, and that brought the IDF.
תוך 3-4 דקות ראית איזה 4.
In 4 minutes, you already had five patrol cars of the army on the scene when they heard that it was Jews throwing rocks at Arabs. But when there were Arabs throwing rocks at Jews, we're short on manpower.
5 ניידות שמה. כל פעם שרצינו להזיק את הצבא או את המשטרה, דיווחנו שקריית ארבע זורק את הבנים.
We learned that whenever we needed military support or protection, we would call to say that Jews are attacking Arabs.
ישר הצבא והמשטרה הגיעו. יום אחד אני שואל את מפקד המשטרה, איך זה קורה שאתם על זריקת אבנים של על...
So then they would show up, and where are the Jews throwing a rock? We don't know, they left.
רבים אתם ישר מגיבים, הוא אומר, יש לנו כוח מיוחד למשימה הזאת.
זירת האירוע סמוך לצומת הזכוכית
לא עולה! תלמיד ישיבת הסדר נרצח אחר הצהריים בחברון. מן הירי אתמול נהרג.
And these are other news reports of occasions where Arabs murdered Jews in the area.
שרית, בת 17.
נרצחה אמש מיריות מחבלים.
חיים שק ואיגור שרייטמן.
התנגשות בבני משפחת לפיד. מתיישבים בחברון מצאו אותו מתבוסס בדמו.
ראש הממשלה, עם כל הזלזול שלו, הוא בזה משדר שדר שחיי היהודים כאן אינם שווים ככלי.
The Prime Minister essentially is sending a message that the lives of Jews here are not worth anything whatsoever.
אנחנו דורשים מהצבא שיעשה כל מה שצריך לעשות כדי שזה לא יקרה.
We're asking the army please to do what they can to prevent these Arab attacks on Jewish civilians. Because I'm warning you, this place is going to explode.
36 שעות לאחר הטבח.
And I suspect that's the lead up to the Baruch Goldstein incident.
במערת המכפלה, המתח בחברון בעיצומו.
טבח במערת המכפלה גרם לממשלת רבין להתכנס ולהגיד מה התגובה שאנחנו יכולים לעשות כממשלת שמאל שעושה עכשיו הסכם שלום עם הפלסטינים. הם באים ואומרים, זאת ההזדמנות לפנות את היישוב היהודי מחברון.
What ended up happening is that the Rabin administration, seeing the situation in Hebron and the ongoing nonstop murderous attacks by Arabs against Jews, determined this is our opportunity to clear out that community for once and for all, get the Jews out of Hebron. Let's use the nonstop Arab attacks as our opportunity to say we've got to get you all out of there for safety. So there's a newspaper example, Sarid, Yossi Sarid was the main, that I showed you earlier, main left-wing politician. Yehudei Hebron, Yifonu, Halikud Lefateret Sarid. So the minister, Sarid, said the Jews of Hebron need to all be expelled for their own good. And the Likud, the right-wing party, that you nowadays know as the Netanyahu party, called for the firing of that minister, Sarid.
האם יש בהחלטה משום הכנת דעת הקהל לפינוי המתיישבים היהודים בחברון?
ראו בקריית ארבע את הסמל של המאבק בממשלה, ולכן החליטו שפה יורידו אותנו על הברכיים.
The government made the decision that here in Hebron would be the showdown. They're going to bring us down to our knees, and that will be the model for clearing out all the Jews of Judea Samaria.
ממשלת רבין חתמה על הסכם אוסלו.
The Rabin government signed the Oslo Accords, and within it, they were going to commit to give 90% of the land to Arafat.
גרטו הם מחזירים 90% לרשות הפלסטינית, מפנים התנחלויות, והם מגלים שאפילו מאחז של 11 קרוונים לא חוקיים הם לא יכולים לפנות. מה הם עושים? הרי הם חתמו על...
So they undertook to get the Jews out of Hebron, and then they found they couldn't get people out. That although some were ready to leave in return for compensation, they really could not get people out of Hebron. The Jews were staying. So what did they do? They signed a deal that they weren't able to implement. Harihem chatmu al heskem shehem lo yacholim liyasem oto. They couldn't implement it. They had promised to close down all the settlements, all the communities, and so how are they going to do it?
שהם לא יכולים ליישם אותו.
Such a situation.
וההסתכלות של ממשלת רבין, שאליה היה שותף גם ראש השב"כ.
So Rabin made the decision that to get the Jews out of Hebron and the rest of Judea Samaria, he would need help from the Shabak. He would need the things we talked about it much earlier. He would need the Shabak to go deep state and help the government clear out the Jews by changing public attitudes toward the Jews in Hebron.
זה שהמתנחלים, ובייחוד הקיצוניים שבהם, ובייחוד אלה שנמצאים בנקודות החיכוך הכי קשות, שזה חברון, מערת המכפלה, הם למעשה טריז לשלום, והם בעצם יביאו לשפיכות דם.
The idea was to convince to the public that the Jews living in Hebron are the ones who are the danger to the entire country. They're the ones who are endangering peace, and they're the ones effectively shedding the blood.
מי מתמשכת, הוא יושב עם פרי, ועכשיו אומר, אוקיי, אנחנו לא מצליחים ולא יכולים, ואתם אומרים לי שיהיה מלחמת אחים, איך אני יכול לעמוד במצב כזה? הוא דופק על השולחן, איך יכול להיות מצב כזה? תביאו...
So Rabin was just deeply frustrated, banged on the table, spoke to the Shabak, and said, I need your help. I got to get them out.
בלי פתרונות, מה עושים? רבין יזם את הפעלתו של השב"כ באזור חברון.
Rabin is the one who brought in the Shabak for the purpose of getting the Jews out of Hebron.
ליצור פרובוקציות.
To create provocations.
שיכפישו את שם...
That would make the reputation of the settlers, of the Jews of Hebron, to be soiled and to defame them so that there would be a national revulsion against the kinds of people living there.
המתיישבים באזור הזה ויקלו על פינוי היישובים במסגרת הסכמי אוסלו.
ברוך מרזל, עוד תרגיל ביחסי ציבור, ניסיון אמיתי לגייס מתנחלים למרד שאתה בונה עליו כבר שנים רבות.
This guy, Baruch Marzel, is another right-wing leader more on the extreme side of the right wing. And he talks about how the Shabak sent people like me to try to incite us, to get us to do things that would create national revulsion and also get us all in prison forever.
ברק שלח אנשים להדיח אותנו, להסית אותנו, למשוך צעירים ללכת אחריהם לפעולות אלימות.
They tried to encourage young people in their teens and stuff to engage in violent activities against innocent Arab civilians. They took and they incited our young people.
הראו איתם את הנוער הצעיר שלנו, המתלהם שלנו.
שבאו להגיד לי שהוא שבקניק. אמרתי, לא יכול להיות, הייתי איתו עכשיו בכיכר גרוס השבוע, והוא יורה לכיוון הבתים של ערבים. היה פעיל בתנועת כך. זה הריח ישר כסוכן שב"כ.
הוא היה קצת חשוד בעינינו.
There was someone who came and you could actually smell, so to speak, that this guy is a counter agent.
בא אלינו כל הזמן, צריך לעשות ככה. היה מישהו עושה איזה משהו שהוא היה שומע עליו, למה לא אמרת לי, תגיד לי, וזה. היה נראה קצת יותר מדי נעלב, אבל...
There was a guy, for example, who came and he would just ask questions all the time. It was kind of clear that he was sent by Shabak. He was acting like he's one of us, but it was clear no one wanted to talk to him.
אתה לא יכול לדעת, לפעמים בן אדם נעלב גם כן, לא, רכב כזה, ניסים שליחויות. סיפור כיסאי, באמת.
אבל אני אמרתי, חבר'ה, הבן אדם עובד טוב, יש לו רכב, צמוד.
So there was a debate among us what to do with this fellow who was asking lots of questions, talking tough, saying he wants to get involved in illegal actions, asking people to join him in illegal actions. And what do we do with this guy? Do we ignore him? Do we use his energy in opposing Oslo? So I, Baruch Marzel says, I said to like people in my circle, you know, he's got good energy. If you're careful with him, he also has a car.
אנחנו אנשים תפרנים. מדביק הרבה מודעות, עושה כל עוד עושה עבודה טובה, לא זורקים אותו. עם השב"כ...
I had said to people, don't throw him out. Just be careful. If Shabak, if the Shin Bet has decided to bring us volunteers, to donate volunteers, to do work for us, take advantage of it. So keep working with the guy.
הוא בא להתנדב אצלנו ולעשות אצלנו עבודה, אין לנו מה להסתיר.
את היית נשואה לשב"כ?
כן. So we now have the film questioner. We're about to see a woman, and he asks, Hayit Nisuala Shabak, were you married to Shabak? Yes.
הייתי נשואה לשב"כ.
I was married to the Shin Bet without knowing it. How many years?
ידיעתי.
כמה שנים?
בסופו של דבר, אחרי כל הגילוי הנאות.
In the end, after everything ultimately was clarified, made public.
זה כ-14 שנה.
I was married to him 14 to 15 years.
בין 14 ל-15 שנה.
מה זה אומר להיות נשואה לשב"כ?
What does that mean, you were married to Shabak?
וואו.
Well, wow.
הסוכני שב"כ האלה...
The Shabak agents, some of them married just so that they would have cover stories.
חלק מהם התחתנו רק כדי לקבל סיפור כיסוי כזה, שלא יחשבו שהם סוכני שב"כ.
That people would not think they're agents for Shabak because they are married and live in the community like regular people.
אתם העסקתם אותי ללא רצוני.
You people, referring to Shabak out there, you played me without my knowing it, without my agreeing to be part of it, lelo ritzoni, lelo yediati, without my knowing it, without knowing what was going on, and you did this to me.
ללא ידיעתי, ומה אתם אומרים לי עכשיו, שאני לא עבדתי?
And what are you saying? Now you're saying I did not work for you? My womb, you didn't end up using my womb, having him have babies with me?
עבורכם, הרחם שלי לא שימשה אתכם? אתם הולדתם ילדים לצורך כיסוי.
You had children born to women who didn't even know it, simply for the purpose of creating cover stories for your agents.
יש סוכן. תכירו בזה.
Look at what you did. If you want to draft a woman, then draft the woman.
אם אתה רוצה לגייס אישה, תגייס את האישה. אתה לא רוצה לגייס את האישה, אל תשתמש.
If you don't want to draft the woman, then don't bother her.
הדבר הכי גרוע, הכי בעולם, שאני לא יכולה לשכוח ולא יכולה...
The thing that is absolutely the worst thing in the world, that I never will be able to forget, and I never will be able to forgive, Never, ever, ever in my life
לסלוח, לא ולא למפעילים שלו. התמונה הזאת לא עוזבת אותי ולא...
the picture in my mind that I cannot get rid of from my mind and will not leave me until the day I die.
תעזור אותי לצאת מחיי. יום שישי בצהריים אני יחד איתו.
It was a Friday afternoon and I was with him, the Shabak guy who married me, near my mom in the hospital. And my mom was dying of cancer.
אצל אמא שלי בבית החולים, אמא שלי גוססת מהסרטן.
My mom in the hospital was really just about, was gosseset. She was in her final moments of cancer in the hospital.
והיא לא יכולה כבר לדבר, היא לא יכולה...
She no longer could talk. She no longer could do anything. She only had so little time left.
יכולה כלום, והדבר היחידי שהיא הצליחה לעשות זה...
The one thing she was able to do was to give me a sign holding my hand as if to say, please stay with me.
קצת ככה, לעשות לי ככה על היד, כאילו, והמבט בעיניים שלה היה...
And the look in her eyes that sort of was like begging me, please stay with me.
תחינה, פשוט התחננה, ואני אומרת לו, אני רוצה להישאר כאן שבת.
So I called my husband and from the hospital and told him, look, it's Friday afternoon. I'm going to have to spend Shabbat at the hospital. I'm going to have to stay here tonight and be with my mom.
אני רוצה להישאר עם אמא שלי, שבת.
I want to be with my mom this one Shabbat in the hospital.
הוא אומר לי, את לא יכולה.
And he said to me, absolutely not. You may not.
את לא יכולה.
You may not. You have children in the house, and I'm a worker, and you have to be here with the children.
תינוקות בבית ואני עובד. גם באותו רגע שהוא אמר את זה, אני לא...
Even at that moment that he was saying that, it didn't hit me. Again, it didn't hit me. The full impact of this.
עוד פעם, לא נקלט לי המשמעות הזאת. מה זה אני עובד? אבל...
What does that mean, I'm working? You're working? What are you talking about? It's going to be Shabbat. You're not going to be working. But I came home. He said he's going to be working. He's not working. It didn't click that made no sense. That you can't be away from the house because he's going to be home anyway at Shabbat. So I came home for Shabbat, and Saturday night, right after Havdalah, I got a phone call.
במוצאי שבת קיבלתי את הטלפון. אמא שלי נפטרה בלי אף.
And the call was that my mom had just died in the hospital, alone, with no one at her side.
אף אחד לידה. כל הסיפור הזה של אבישי רביב ושל בעלי לשעבר...
And all this story of Avishai Raviv, and he's my former husband, and all this...
כולם, היה צורך לייצר איזושהי סימטריה מוזרה, שאם יש...
Basically, Shabak had decided they needed some kind of cover story that if there's going to be terror against the Arabs, then, or by the Arabs, then there needs to be counter-terror by Jews, or some story like that.
טרור ערבי, אז כנראה יש גם טרור יהודי, ואם אין אותו במציאות, אז בואו נייצר אותו.
And if there is not actually any Jewish terror against Arabs, let's create some.
כדי שישרת איזושהי מטרה פוליטית כלשהי.
So that it serves some political purpose. She's not a political person, and she's saying, so it accomplished some political purpose, but people are getting killed on the roads. And
בדרך אנשים נהרסים, נרמסים.
ככה שב"כ רצה ללכלך.
And thus it was that Shabak wanted to to make filthy, to make dirty, and the people of Kiryat Arba, to make them repulsive to the national image.
להכפיש את קריית ארבע.
כשאתה בא ואתה מסתכל ואתה רואה גם את הכמות של הסוכנים שהיו שם, בקריית ארבע ובאזור חברון שעושים.
When you look back and you think of all the Shabak agents that were there in Kiryat Arba at the time, and the greater Hebron area, who were doing this to different people.
ואת זה שאין שום מעצרים, אז אתה בא ואתה אומר.
And there were no obstacles, there were no restrictions to how far they would go.
וואלה, יכול להיות שהם מכינים את השטח לפינוי חברון? יכול להיות שהם מכינים את דעת הקהל לזה שהמתנחלים בחברון...
They were engaged in changing public opinion against the Jews living in Hebron and other parts of Judea, Samaria, portraying them as extremists and racists and violent people who had no claim of moral authority.
הם קיצוניים, גזעניים, אלימים, שכל מטרתם היא לפוצץ את הסכמי אוסלו, וצריך לפנות אותם, חייבים לפנות אותם.
So there were public demonstrations. Rabin resigned. This is Avishai Raviv.
אז מתחיל לפעול אבישי רביב בדרך שהוא פועל על ידי השב"כ.
And then began Avishai Raviv more publicly to work on behalf of Shabak.
תחילת דרכו, פעיל בתנועת כך, סביב חולון, בובה.
First they associated him with Rabbi Meir Kahana, Zichron Livracha, Hashem Yikom Damo. But Rabbi Kahana had nothing to do with him.
אידיאולוגית, כהנא. איפה שהוא, מתי שהוא...
That's Raviv. So first they decided to associate him with the far-right extremes of Israel.
הפך לסוכן.
And then he went about recruiting young people to join terror organization of his called Ayal that would attack Arabs.
סוכן שמופעל באינטנסיביות אדירה, שמדווח עשרות דיווחים, אם לא מאות.
לכהנא מופתעים.
He basically generated through his actions tens of Shabak reports of acts of violence.
שהם נעקפים מימין בשל ציודו הרב ובשל היותו חוזר בתשובה, מחולון, יש לו ג'יפ, יש לו מכשירי קשר, יש לו...
Basically, people saw that he was quite a dynamic, charismatic guy. This is not him. This is just acted out to give you video for the film. You saw him a moment ago. And the basic idea was he had a Jeep. He had all kinds of communications devices. He had great skills and was able to get people to follow him on nighttime acts that setting fire to Arab houses and attacking Arabs.
כל אמצעים. אבישי רביב עושה מאות פעולות, אלימות.
Raviv's people did hundreds of different acts of violence.
שאותנו מתקשר, מה שחשוב לו זה לתקשר אותם.
התחיל לעשות דברים שחרגו מעבר לכל פרופורציה של פעיל פוליטי רגיל.
He started doing things that just went way beyond any proper proportion of counter activity against Arab violence.
אני לא יודע מי עשה את זה.
That is the real guy. That was Avishai Raviv when he was younger. And he's telling the media after some act of violence, I don't know who did it. There was some act of violence, and it's clear from the context. He's being reported afterwards. Since you're the best known right-wing violent leader, were you involved? He says, I don't know who did it. I have to assume it was Jews who did it.
אני מעריך שזה יהודים עשו את זה, לא יודע מי הבן אדם שעשה את זה. בכל מקרה, תנועת היה לתנועה חוקית.
My group, Ayal, is a legal group. And so I'm sure Jews did it, but not we, because we don't break the law. And I call on all of our followers not to break the law.
קוראים לכל הפעילים לנהוג רק על פי חוק.
אם יש פעיל ימין שמופיע בצורה רחבה בתקשורת,
If there was going to be a right-wing activist who would be sort of telegenic for the media, it was Avishai Raviv.
זה אבישי רביב. תחשוב, שנות ה-90, יש לך רק את אמצעי התקשורת, יש לך רק רדיו, טלוויזיה ועיתונות.
Remember, this is the 1990s. They didn't have internet the way we do now, and you didn't have, certainly, social media. All you had in those days was radio, television, and newspapers.
והרדיו והטלוויזיה ועיתונות, במי הם עוסקים? באבישי רביב ובקריאות.
And who are the radio, TV, and newspapers running to after every act of violence? They would run to Avishai Raviv. And they would quote and publish his different public calls on Jews to attack Arabs and Arab traders. Irgun Hayamani Kitzoni Ayal, the right-wing extremist group Ayal, saying that that we did not threaten a particular cabinet minister of the government, which they obviously did. And okay.
שלו לפגיעה בישראלים בוגדים ובערבים.
There he is issuing statements calling different Israelis traitors who need to be dealt with.
אוקיי, וקורא לפגיעה ברבין, וקורא
And he's calling for attacks on Rabin.
לפגוע באדריכלי אוסלו.
And he's calling for attacks on people involved in the Oslo Agreements.
אני מגיע למיליוני אנשים.
And he was reaching millions of people through newspapers, TV and radio.
פעולות שלו זה להכות ערבים, לשבור חלונות.
He's calling on them, his people, to attack Arabs, just any Arabs, destroy windows of their homes.
אני רואה יהודי די חסון, לוקח אבן, ליד חיילים, ליד שוטרים, דופק.
And you would see video on the news of a Jew picking up a rock in front of the IDF, and no one was stopping him. And he would just break windows in an Arab house, and nobody tried to stop him. And what we now know is that they knew he was working for Shabak as part of a deeper strategy to create national revulsion against the right.
דופק את זה בבית ערבי. ואני מסתכל ימינה ואני מסתכל שמאלה, והוא לא פוחד. למחרת התברר לי שזה אבישי רביב.
אם הייתי יודע, הייתי מספר למישהו?
כלומר?
על כל שטות הכי קטנה שהייתה בעולם, היו מזמנים אותי לחקירות. פעם עשיתי איזה ערבי ברחוב טען שהסתכלתי עליו ככה, ישר חקרו אותי על איומים. והוא מפנצ'ר מכוניות, מאיים על אנשים, מרביץ לאנשים.
They would go around beating up Arabs. An Arab would say, I accidentally looked at him and he beat me up.
ולשם מה?
And what was the purpose of this, the guy asks? Like, obviously this guy's living in Hebron, and he's saying, like, how did that help our cause? What was the purpose of beating up Arabs?
למה הוא עושה את זה? למה הוא פוגע בפלסטין?
Why is he doing this? Why is he so wrongly attacking Arabs who haven't done anything?
בצורה כל כך סיטונאית.
שיפוצים בחלחול, כך כינו את ציורי הלילה.
פה זה אנחנו, לא הצבא.
הסיירת של ארגון אייל בפעולה שהם מכנים סיור נוכחות, להראות לערבים מי הם אדוני הארץ הזאת.
So his group would do midnight travel. They would do midnight like inspections with the lights on in Arab towns to scare Arabs, to let Arabs see that they're driving through the town with cars in the middle of the night looking for action, just to make trouble.
במטרה כדי להגיע להתנגשות עם ערבים.
פרובוקציות.
פרובוקציות, כן.
תחמוש.
כן.
באקדח.
כן.
And they would be armed with guns.
תעלי.
כן.
מתי תירגעו?
אנחנו נירגע, שהערבים יהיו רחוק מפה.
סליחה?
And the reporter, TV reporter says, and when will you be satisfied? And the guy says, when all the Arabs have left.
אתם לא יכולים להפעיל סוכנים שיפעלו בצורה...
And this guy, the Hebron guy, is saying, I'm sorry, you cannot go around bringing in people to be active agent provocateurs who are just going around creating, inciting terrorism on our side.
הטרוריסטית, אתם לא יכולים לממן ארגון טרור.
You just can't do that. You're not allowed to do that.
זה סרט הוליוודי. תחשוב.
It's like a Hollywood movie, if you think about it. You think about it. This particular guy sitting there as like a leader in the right wing.
תחשוב שיש איזו דמות כזאתי, כל הפעילי הימין יושבים במעצר מנהלי.
All the other right-wing activists, law-abiding, are sitting in prison, and this guy who's walking around saying we need to throw rocks through their windows and beat them up, this guy's walking free. No one ever arrests this guy. Think about it when you look back. There's something strange about that.
והוא פועל לבד בשטח, קאובוי. אוקיי, ואף אחד לא עוצר אותו.
He works just on his own. He's a cowboy. Okay, and nobody stops him. Because he's employed by Shabak.
והוא פעיל של שב"כ. נראה לך הגיוני.
אבישי רביב.
Does this make any sense? Avishai Raviv was effectively a paid representative of the government.
היה שליח של המדינה. המדינה מימנה אותו. המדינה שילם לו משכורת.
The government paid him a salary.
עשה את כל המעשים. הוא הציץ את כל האש. הוא בחבר...
He incited all the rioting. He incited all the fire and the violence. He was paid to do it by Shabak, to make the people living in Judea Samaria revulsive and repulsive to the national sense.
סוכני שב"כ האלה, והם גרמו לקריית ארבע את התדמית הכי שלילית בעולם. הוא שלח שליחים להתעסק איתי, לפנצ'ר את האוטו.
He sent people to meet with me, that I should go, let's say, puncturing the tires on Arab cars, or to throw rocks at Arab cars.
דפוק את האוטו, הבן שלי קיבל מכות מאחד מהסוכנים של אבישי רביב, ושכב עם זעזוע מוח בבית חולים 3 ימים.
My son, I refused to do it, and my son got beaten up by his people. He was in the hospital for 3 days.
הבן שלי.
My son.
הבן אדם יוצא עם איזה בחורה מגוש עציון, הוא לא בא לטוב מה שנקרא, מתחיל לאיים עליה, מתחיל להטריד אותה, מפנצ'ר לאבא שלה את הגלגלים, אבא שלה היה איזה סגן אלוף בצבא, הולך מתלונן במשטרה, המשטרה לא עושה כלום.
יש לו הצהרות נגד אוסלו שצריך לראות בחיילים.
He issued public statements against Oslo that urged people to shoot Israeli soldiers. Pe'ilim biyamin hakitzoni, activists on the extreme right, nira b'chayalim she'inasu lifnot otanu. We will shoot bullets at IDF soldiers who try to evacuate us from the land.
אתה מבין? הוא רצה לייצר כותרת. הנה...
He was always looking for headlines.
אני נכנס במתנחלים, אני נכנס בימין, אני נכנס
I will not, lo ahases lirot gam b'chaver. I will not hesitate to shoot even a colleague, Raviv, b'milchama ein achim, because in war there are no brothers.
מי שתומך בקריית ארבע.
ואז אתה עושה מעשה שהוא יוצא דופן לדעתי בתולדות מדינת ישראל. אתה תובע את המדינה.
כן.
אתה תובע את המדינה למשפט?
אני תובע את המדינה והמדינה.
So this guy that was just being interviewed is now suing the government. Avishai, Tivia neged amdina, a lawsuit against the government. Avishai Raviv paga b'shmam hatov shel hamitnachalim, charging that this guy, Avishai Raviv, caused defamation against the settlers. I don't know if that's a winning lawsuit. Defamation is very hard.
המדינה התחמקה שנים על הכפשה של קריית ארבע על ידי מדינת ישראל, סוכן שתול של השב"כ, שמקבל משכורת עתק מהשב"כ, וכל תפקיד...
He was a planted agent of Shabak, being paid a salary by Shabak, and his entire job assignment was to muddy up the name, make filthy the name of Kiryat Arba.
להכפיש וללכלך ולפגוע בקריית ארבע. זה מה שהוא עשה כל הזמן. הסית והדיח, העיקר לקבל כותרת, העיקר לבוא עם שלל לשב"כ, הנה עשיתי את זה, עשיתי את זה, עשיתי את זה.
והתקשורת משתפת עם זה פעולה.
And the mainstream media worked with him hand in hand, without any hesitation, all the way through.
בסוף.
ואבישי רביב, ראש תנועת אייל, ארגון יהודי לאומי, שאנשיו טענו כי ביצעו את רצח הערבי בחלחול. היום רביב שוחרר.
לא יכול להיות שיש 1.5 שנה של פעולות כאלה קשות, שגם...
It is absolutely inconceivable that there could have been 1.5 years of such violent activities and for the purposes of confounding the Oslo Accords.
הן סותרות את הסכמי אוסלו. זאת אומרת, יש לך עכשיו תהליך אוסלו. הולכים להחזיר שטחים. הממשלה, הדבר
The government was trying to give up the land. They had made a commitment to Arafat. They're going to give him the land. And in order to do that,
יכול אמור להיות לה, הכי חשוב, זה שהשטח לא יבער. וגוף של...
And it was important to change public opinion. And the government, the national government, sent people like this, whose whole purpose was to incendiary, basically to set Judea Samaria on fire.
המדינה שולח בן אדם שכל מטרתו זה להעביר את השטח.
הוא היה די מרשים, מאוד מפורסם.
He was very not elegant. He had like a really great personality. He was very famous. He was an activist, charismatic.
מאוד פעיל, רואים אותו בכל מקום, שומעים אותו בכל מקום.
I mean, you saw him everywhere. He was in all the media.
סטודנט.
I was a student. He was a student in the university. He was at Tel Aviv University. I was a student in the university, the lady says. He was a student, he said, at a kollel. In other words, he was learning advanced Torah studies, he said. So he's like everything. This was, in my sense, he was a perfect guy. Shemebechinati ugam bachur torani. So he's charismatic and he's smart, goes to university. He's studying to be like on a rabbinic level, whether to be a rabbi, but he's learning in yeshiva. He's like a wonderful...
באוניברסיטה, סטודנט בכולל, זאת אומרת שמבחינתי הוא גם בחור תורני. נראה שידוך טוב על פניו.
I mean, I was crazy about him. And so נראה שידוך טוב. He seemed to be a wonderful shidduch, a wonderful guy for me to marry.
את מכירה את אבישי רביב?
Again, this is for the film, they have him hired, like, this is just an actor without talking much. He's just portraying, I've shown you what the real Avishai Raviv looks like, and the estimate is he's kind of like, that's what he looked like in his 20s or early 30s. So anyway, they're now interviewing this other lady. Do you know Avishai Raviv? I suspect she's the same one that was being depicted a moment ago with the ice cream.
מכירה לעומק, כן.
Oh, yes, I know him. I know him very, very deeply. Next question. How do you know him? Well, we began as students at Bar Ilan University.
מכירה אותו.
התחיל כסטודנטים בבר אילן.
Yes, initially we were students in Bar Ilan and we really we knew him. Ben's bat zug may mean that she married him. Maybe she was married. Definitely at least a girlfriend. Bat zug could mean that she's married.
נמשיך כשיצאנו כחברים ממש במשך חודשיים.
Yeah, we're very, very good friends. About 2 months. And then she's asked, how is he to date? איך נראה date עם אבישי רביב? What was it like to date him?
תגידי, איך נראה דייט עם אבישי רביב?
קודם כל נראה מאוד מאוד מפנק.
He was great. First of all, he would spoil me. And he's really nice.
מאוד רומנטי. מדברים...
He was very romantic. We would talk about great things. We talk about politics.
הרבה מאוד על פוליטיקה. מדברים על מה...
We would talk about what we want later in our lives and where we're going to live and how we're going to, and do we want to continue building this relationship between us.
מה אנחנו רוצים ואיפה אנחנו נגור אם נמשיך את הקשר בינינו ואיזה חינוך אנחנו רוצים.
We talked about what kind of education do we want to give our future children. And
רוצים שהילדים שלנו יקבלו, באמת חושבים על לבנות בית.
I mean, really, we were talking about building a house together.
כסף לא הייתה אף פעם הבעיה.
There was never a problem with money. He always seemed to have enough money. It was enough to go to he could take me to a restaurant.
הבעיה שלו, וזה מסעדה, וזה... לארג' מאוד, זר של 30 ורדים לקראת שבת שמגיעים.
Before Shabbat, he would send me 30 roses.
מגיעים אליי הביתה.
השב"כ השקיע.
השב"כ השקיע.
So the interviewer says, and basically the Shabak simply planted him for this purpose in your life? And she responds, yes, the Shabak planted him in my life.
Yeah. הוא הסיע אותי פעם אחת לקרובי משפחה שלי בקריית ארבע.
One time, he gave me a lift, a car ride, to some of my relatives, she says, who live in Kiryat Arba, near Hebron.
אז עוד היה אפשר להיכנס לחלחול. אנחנו נוסעים בתוך...
And he drove me, and then we went to the city or town of Khalkhul, which is where he's from, and we drove around Khalkhul, and he said to me, do you see that elderly fellow there?
חלחול, הוא אומר, את רואה את הזקן שם? בואי נבהיל אותו.
And he stopped the car. It was late at night. There was an elderly guy in the street. And he said, would you mind if we also give this guy a lift? He looks like he could use a lift. Elderly guy all by himself. So he went out and he grabbed the guy. He drove the car in a crazy speed. Bimhirut miturefet. He suddenly stepped on the gas and drove really, really fast towards the elderly guy. And to the degree that the elderly guy jumped on the side.
הוא נוסע במהירות מטורפת לכיוון הזקן, והזקן כבר קופץ לצד, ואז הוא חוזר.
תעלון! תעלון. מה אתה עושה פה? מה אתה עושה פה? יש לך תעודה מזהה? יש לך תעודה מזהה?
כולנו היינו סטודנטים, כולנו...
Hey, look, we were all students. We were all trying to, in the midst of concluding our studies and our degrees.
רצינו לסיים תואר ולהתחיל חיים ולעבוד.
And we were all planning to launch our lives, to get started and begin a life with a degree. And he he just lied to me every day. Hu pashut shiker yom yom. Simply, he just lied every day. Shikerli befartzuf. He looked me in the face and he just lied.
שיקר, יום יום שיקר לי בפרצוף. היה מישהו אחר ממה שאני פגשתי.
He was a completely different person from the one whom I had met.
כן, איך אני עוזר? ככה, איך אתה רוצה אותי? יפעת רק זריז, כי אני בשוונג, יש לי משהו חשוב להגיד.
הכל בסדר, הכל בסדר.
נשתה כוס מים. רוצים מים?
רוצה מים, לא.
גם אותי.
Okay, they're about to interview this guy, and the film is just showing the guy sitting down and getting set up.
אני דביר קריב, עובד שטח ביחידה
This guy is saying, my name is Devir Kariv. I was part of the Shabak Machlaka Yehudit, the Jewish department. That is to say, think of the FBI. Imagine if the FBI has a special unit on black people. So Shabak in Israel has a special Jewish unit. And he worked in this special unit, L'Sikul Terror Lo Aravi. His job was on non-Arab terror, namely Jewish. What else is there in Israel?
סיכול טרור לא ערבי לשעבר.
ומפעיל סוכנים?
מפעיל סוכנים, עובד שטח זה מפעיל סוכנים.
I worked as an agent in Shabak for many years and in that department.
חטיבה, כן.
And that's again the real Avishai Raviv. Perhaps the filmmaker says the man who's the key to this entire story מהרבה בחינות to Avishai Raviv. He says, you know, perhaps the man who's the main key to this whole discussion is Avishai.
איש המפתח בכל הסיפור פה מהרבה בחינות הוא אבישי רביב.
So he's a good agent, he has nothing to say. For those of you that love dogs, there you go.
כמעט כל אחד הקים לעצמו ארגון. שמעת?
Basically, in those days, every guy who wanted created his own terrorist organization. It's sort of like, he doesn't say it, but I'm hearing, it's like what I said at the beginning of this, with the political parties. It's true. Every Jew creates his own political party in Israel, and every Jew had his own organization. He says, for example, did you ever hear of the terror organization named Dove, like my name, but not with Daled Vet?
ארגון דוב, דיכוי בוגדים. מי זה?
אבישי רביב.
הקים אותו מישהו.
So the guy says, did you ever hear of the terror organization Dove, which stands for Dikui Bogdim, or taking down the traitors? So he's saying, so who was Dove, that terror group? Well, Avishai created it, okay?
אוקיי, ארגון אייל, מי זה?
There was another terror group, Ayal, Aleph Yud Lamed, Irgun Yehudi Lochem, the Organization of Fighting Jews. Who created Ayal? Also Avishai Raviv. So you run around creating terror organizations.
אבישי רביב הקים, נכון?
ידעתי שאייל זה ארגון יהודי לוחם שלחם בנאצים. וכדי לחזק לנו...
The guy's saying his face is covered, so he's saying basically sentiment as who hevilanu. So he prepared for us all kinds of material to advance the cause.
את הסנטימנט הזה, הוא הביא לנו חומרים כתובים על ארגון אייל ההיסטורי וכמה אנחנו...
He would create all kinds of documents, and he wrote up documents about the history of the Ayal organization, which basically he created, and who knows whether he even wrote it or whether Shabak wrote it and gave it to him. And he then distributed all these handouts about our history and what we believe. And in the old days, many years ago, before the state of Israel, there was a group of armed Jews called Ayal HaHistori, the historic old, and our goal is to follow in their way.
ממשיכי דרכם על ידי זה שאנחנו מצילים את המדינה היהודית, גם אם זה...
We are saving the Jewish state.
זה אומר לשלם מחירים.
מי שפעל בגטו ורשה היו בעיקר...
This is Raviv, those who acted in the Warsaw Ghetto were basically young people.
בני נוער, אז לקחת ילדים קטנים ולהתחיל לחנך אותם בדעות שלנו.
So yes, I've taken young people and I have educated them in our beliefs. Again, remember, he's a Shabbat guy. The whole thing is a lie. But there he is being interviewed, Avishai Raviv, Yosef Rosh, the chairman of Maskirut Ayal. He's the chairman of the secretariat of the Ayal organization, explaining that just like in the Warsaw Ghetto, we've taken young people and we're educating them to be young fighters and warriors for our cause. For those who say, the reporter asks, that, you're a little bit like neo-Nazis.
מצדדים בגירוש זרים. אני מאוד מבין אותם. את מי? את הגירוש...
Well, I understand, there's another guy. I understand.
את הנאצים.
אז אם אתם...
I understand the Nazis. This is an Israeli guy, alongside Raviv, is to create hatred for the right wing. So, person is asking, so, imatem hamachteret nilchemet b'natzim, az mi hanatzim. So, if you are the underground fighting the Nazis, using Nazi tactics, who are the Nazis?
המחתרת שנלחמת בנאצים. אז מי הנאצים?
חד משמעית רבין וכל...
Well, Rabin is a Nazi, unequivocally, and all those who signed on to the Oslo Accords are Nazis.
מי שחבר על הסכמי אוסלו. נבנתה אצלנו תחושה שאנחנו צריכים להתכונן למשהו גדול שהולך לקרות.
תגיד, מדוע אתה לא חושף את הפנים שלך?
So the reporter says, tell me, why have you requested that your face be darkened and why don't you just show your face? What are you afraid of?
ממה אתה חושש?
קודם כל אני מפחד מהמערכת.
First of all, the guy says, I'm concerned about the government. And I'm concerned about the avenging opposition. That is, I'm afraid of these.
מערכת נקמנית. אני עושה לה חשבון. אני חושש מלהיחשף, כי זה ארגון שאין לו גבולות.
I'm concerned about having my face shown because the Avishai Raviv organizations, those are people without any borders. And I don't know what they'll do if they see me.
אני לא יודע מה...
לאיזה ארגון אתה מתכוון?
השב"כ?
What organization are you concerned about? Oh, and he's saying, I'm concerned about Shabak. I want my face covered because I don't know what Shabak will do. If they see my face and they see that I'm revealing stuff to the media.
אבישי רביב, איזה בן אדם הוא?
What kind of person is Avishai Raviv?
אבישי רביב רוצה לראות שאתה מספיק מופרך, שאתה
Avishai Raviv wants to... I missed a little bit of that, I'm sorry. See if I get it.
אבישי רביב, איזה בן אדם הוא?
אבישי רביב רוצה לראות שאתה מספיק מופרך, שאתה מגרד את הגבולות וטיפה מעבר. הוא תמיד פעל עם נערים, תמיד פעל עם קטינים.
He constantly worked with young people, with extremists. One time, a Haredi young fellow came into Kiryat Arba.
ילד חרדי לקריית ארבע, עם מגבעת וחליפה. די מתלהב.
And he came in wearing, you know, a Haredi with a suit and tie and...
כל ההפגנות, מכל הבלגנים, הוא שלח אותי לפה, הוא שולח אותי לשם, תארגן את זה, תביא את המקלעות.
And the fellow said, you know, he's wearing a suit and tie, and he's the kind of guy that would not be involved in politics. And he told me that Avishai Raviv sent him to do this. He sent me here, he sent me there, he sent me to do this, he sent me to do that.
תרדו לשער הדרומי, כל הזמן בנסיעות עם הסובארו הלבנה שלו. אני הייתי ילד בן 13.
All the time I'm in this white Subaru, and look, I was a 13-year-old, 14-year-old boy at the time.
14, אלה הגילאים. אתה עוד...
Those were the ages of those of us that got involved in this stuff.
עוד לא מספיק נכווה בעולם, עוד לא מספיק מצולק, כדי לא לתת אמון באנשים.
You're not yet experienced enough in life. You're not yet wise enough. And you believe people. And you trust. You don't have suspicions. And if they seem of your ideology, you would never in a million years at age 13 or 14 think you're dealing with a counter agent.
שהם נראים לך סופר בדעתך. אני עוד לא הספקתי לקלוט שזה מניפולציה. על שבתות ביחד, על אימוני ירי.
At that age, I couldn't contemplate or imagine that I'm being manipulated by someone with a different agenda. We were just a bunch of 8th graders, and we believed it.
ילדים בכיתה ח' אימוני ירי?
כן.
וההורים שלך, איפה הם?
And where were the reporter asks, and where were your parents during this time? He says, our parents, they didn't know what's going on. Because we're like an underground. Our parents didn't know we were involved in this stuff.
ההורים שלי לא מודעים לכל הסיפור הזה, כי אני במחתרת.
המצלמות תיעדו לראשונה את אבישי רביב בקייטנת הקיץ. תריסר נערים בני 14 ומעלה הוזמנו.
So he had a summer camp for 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds. There was a camp called Baruch HaGever, I guess, and they were...
להשתתף במחנה הנוער ברוך הגבר. פותחים בתפילת שחרית ליד קברו של ברוך גולדשטיין.
הדירה הזאת ב-306 היא בעצם הכניסה השנייה לאיפה שברוך גולדשטיין גר. אני יכול להגיד דבר אחד שאני ראיתי את ההסתה יוצאת מהדירה.
So we don't have a lot of time for this part of it, but they were created as a summer camp and were taught a lot that what Baruch Goldstein had done was righteous, and I don't want to get into the whole Baruch Goldstein thing. That had been an act where he killed 34 Arabs in Marada Machpelah area in 1994, around Purim time, 1994.
הדירה הזאת, בתוך הארון שהיה בתוך הסלון, ארון פלסטיק, עם השולחן פלסטיק, כל הזמן היה עמוס בחומר הסתה נגד רבין.
And the whole summer camp was just incitement against Rabin. That's all it was non-stop incitement against Rabin.
למה היו מוסתים מהדירה הזאת נגד רבין?
And there's a demonstration again of truly masses upon masses in Kikar Tzion. Rabin, go home.
הדפים של רבין במדי SS היו על השולחן.
Now, one of the most important images in Israel history is that at this rally, I believe it was at this particular rally, but otherwise at a rally like it, someone raised a placard, a large placard showing Rabin in a German Nazi officer uniform like Eichmann. Basically, a photo of Eichmann only with the face of Rabin. On the left, to this day, 30 years later, many on the left blame that picture at that rally for the assassination of Rabin, which seems a bit crazy because I've seen a lot of pictures in Israel of people depicted as Nazis. Everybody gets very exaggerated on these political things in Israel, right and left. But that particular photo, which took place at the rally and shortly after he was assassinated, and who do you blame? They weren't satisfied simply in blaming a lone wolf, Yigal Amir. It was important on the left to blame the entire Israeli right-wing society for the assassination. So they would point to that picture which existed at that right-wing rally. And like, no one really knows who created that picture and who raised it. So he's talking about it now because it's become legend. The picture of Rabin, and Netanyahu addressed, as did other political leaders on the right, he addressed that right-wing demonstration. And there's no reason, he never saw that picture, but part of the left-wing legend is that Netanyahu saw the picture and did not demand that it be taken down. So that's that background. There you go. This became, for the mass media, on the Israel's left-wing mass media, that was the takeaway of a demonstration of 100,000 people. Nothing about their cause, nothing about their concerns that Arafat's going to have his own country. The mass media coverage was, look at the picture that one particular guy raised at that demonstration. I'm holding here in my hand, Chaim, referring to the news anchor back in the studio, an announcement, a depiction of the Prime Minister in a Gestapo outfit. And it's kind of interesting because if you want to believe the left-wing narrative, that this is what caused the assassination of Rabin, which is absurd. But if that was the narrative they want to promote, that the right wing is that terrible, no one saw that picture until this Shmegeki put it up on national TV. That's how the Israeli left.
מי שמעביר לתקשורת את הכרזות זה אבישי רביב.
Now, who brought that picture to the demonstration? And who saw to it that that picture ended up in the hands of a reporter? Avishai Raviv.
אבישי רביב מעביר את זה גם לניצן חן וגם...
He gave it to that reporter Nitzan Chen and to other reporters.
לעוד כתבים שנמצאים שם בת.
Now, meanwhile, Netanyahu, this is 30 years ago, was addressing that demonstration. But it was a gigantic demonstration of more than 100,000. And he did not see that. He's reading his speech.
מי שעמד על המרפסת לא ראה את הכרזה הזאתי.
Anyone standing on that platform did not see the specific signs and placards.
כולם ראו את הכרזה הזאתי בטלוויזיה.
But everyone saw it on television. Now, Erev HaChatima shel Eskem Oslo Bet. So 1993 was the original Oslo Agreement, and 1995 was the implementation part 2. So right away at that point, when Rabin signed Oslo II, Rabin's government at that point was doing horribly in the opinion polls, was having tremendous bad opinion polls. Country was soured on him and his government. So it was at this point that Shabak was asked to increase the provocations that could be ascribed to the right wing in order to pick up Rabin's political poll numbers. HaShabak mafilim sidrat provocatiot. The Shabak started to implement a series of provocations kedei la'azor lememshala Rabin, in order to assist the Rabin government la'avir et ha'eskem, to create a public mood to support the signing of that Oslo II.
עכשיו לרצח שהיה בחלחול.
5 חיילים יהודים הם שהסתובבו כ3 שעות בעיירה, היכו, גנבו, ערכו חיפוש בבתים, קשרו 3 תושבים ורצחו את...
An incident occurred in the town of Khalkhul where 5 Arabs were killed. And this was a national outrage. 5 apparently innocent Arabs were killed ostensibly by right-wing extremists in Khalkhul.
סלימן זמע כבן 23. הרצח זעזע את חלחול.
תיאור מזעזע. תפוז המחאה.
This was an outrage of the worst sort. It was just horrible.
ממש.
הרצח בחלחול מצטרף לשורה של מעשי רצח מסתוריים שבוצעו באזור חברון וטרם פוענחו.
2 ארגונים יהודיים קיצוניים קיבלו עליהם אחריות לרצח.
2 extremist Jewish organizations claimed credit anonymously for that is, they announced who they were, but they claimed credit probably by phone or something for the killings of those Arabs in Khalkhul.
שלשום התקשר אלמוני לכתבים ואמר כי ארגון...
The reporter is saying that yesterday an anonymous voice contacted journalists and said that the Ayal organization, the Organization of Jewish Fighters, we saw that earlier, that's the Avishai Raviv organization, takes credit.
אייל, ארגון יהודי לוחם, הוא שעומד מאחורי הרצח בחלחול, שנעשה לדבריו כנקמן הפיגועים שהיו בחברון.
אבישי רביב, העומד בראש תנועת אייל, שאנשיה טענו כי הם שביצעו את הרצח בחלחול, שוחרר היום בערבות.
הנה ראש ארגון אייל, אבישי רביב.
אני לא דיברתי עם המשטרה, שירף...
So they're interviewing Avishai Raviv, the head of that organization that has claimed responsibility or credit, and says, I did not talk with the police. I refused to cooperate with the police.
הוא אומר, אם ימשיכו ההסכמים, והכוונה היא להסכמי אוסלו, אנחנו נחריף את הצעדים.
And he basically is saying that if the government continues with its Oslo agreement, these things are going to continue happening.
יש סערה בינלאומית.
There was an international outrage.
גינויים לאורך כל הקשר.
All the world was busy condemning Israel and Israeli right-wingers for the killings of those Arabs.
הפוליטית אגב, יוסי שריד אומר דברים קשים מאוד.
That guy, Yossi Sarid, we've mentioned him twice today, the leading politician on the Israeli far left, issued incredibly severe condemnations.
לפני הגילויים האחרונים אמרת, אם כך מתקיימת מצוות יישוב חברון מחדש על ידי יהודים.
And he said, it is now time for us to expel all Jews from Hebron and Kiryat Arba and to close down that settlement, that community.
אזי מצווה היא לעקור אותם משם.
הם מביאים לנו לא פחות נזק.
Shimon Peres, the leader of labor at that time, he was, after Rabin's assassination, he became prime minister and says that the killing of those 5 Arabs in Khalkhul does Israel every bit as much damage as terror by Arabs. And it did Israel a lot of damage.
מהמחבלים.
מתכנסת ישיבת ממשלה, שבה...
Government's emergency meeting of the government was scheduled, and Carmi Gilon, the head of the Shabak, was present.
מופיע כרמי גילון, ראש השב"כ, לתת דיווח לשרים.
הרצח בחלחול בוצע קרוב לוודאי על ידי יהודים ממניעים לאומניים, כך מסרו גורמי ביטחון היום בישיבה השבועית של הממשלה.
So it seems certain that it was Jewish extremists on the right who murdered these 5 Arabs.
רבין מצטרף אליו ומגנה בחריפות.
חלחול תחילה היחידה הארצית.
Rabin reinforced the report from the Shabak head very intensely and severely. And the Jewish unit of Shabak
לחקירת פשעים במשטרת ישראל קיבלה לידיה את חקירת הרצח בחלחול.
שבוע לאחר הרצח, פתאום התפרסם.
בסוף השבוע התעלומה אכן נפטרה. סלמן זמארה מחלחול נרצח בידי 4 פושעים ערבים במהלך שוד.
הסתבר שזה בכלל פלסטינים, זה לא קשור בכלל ליהודים. כבר
2 weeks later, it emerged that the 5 Arabs had been killed by other Arabs. Let me get that back. It emerged that it had been other Arabs. Just like now when you hear about these things with Gaza hunger, and it turns out that it's Hamas doing it.
בסוף השבוע התעלומה אכן נפטרה. סלמן זמארה מחלחול.
Salman Zamari of Khalkhul
נרצח בידי 4 פושעים.
was murdered by 4 Arab criminals, 4 convicted Arab felons, as part of a mahalach shod, as part of a blackmail scheme.
ערבים במהלך שוד.
הסתבר שזה בכלל פלסטין.
In other words, 3, I don't like to use the word Palestinian, 3 Arabs have been arrested, suspected of the murder of the Arab in Khalkhul based on criminal concerns, nothing to do with Jewish nationalism.
זה לא קשור בכלל ליהודים. כבר...
Even though the Shin Bet ascribed that murder to Jewish right-wing extremists and got reinforced by Rabin. Again, harotzchim b'Khalkhul Aravim. The murderers in Khalkhul, they were Arabs after all. Hayamin, and the right wing says, Zot Hayata Alilat Dam. This was a blood libel against us.
ביום הראשון.
We just did a class the other day about the blood libel. How the world would break out in a lie that Jews, let's say for blood on Pesach or something, and the whole world buys into it. This was a blood libel on us.
לאחר הרצח, בשב"כ ידעו שמדובר
At the moment that the murder took place, Shabak already knew that it was Arabs who had killed other Arabs. Because they are, like the FBI, the police, and they knew about that blackmail ring.
פלסטינים. ידיעות אחרונות. אם ידעו ביום
Harotzchim lo hayu Yehudim. The murderers were not Jews.
ראשון. מה פתאום כרמי גילון מטעה את שרי הממשלה?
But the chairman of the Shabak misled the Israeli government as to the source of who killed those Arabs.
ואומר להם שהכיוון הוא יהודי. זאת אומרת, רבין ידע על הפעלת אייל, בספטמבר אייל לוקח אחריות.
In other words, Rabin knew that Ayal, that young people's Avishai Raviv right-wing extremist group existed. Then Eyal took credit for killing the Arabs in Khalkhal, and Rabin used that information against the right wing, even though the organization claimed credit for something it didn't do.
על הרצח בחלחול.
And they basically weren't much of an organization. It was basically one guy who's paid by the Shin Bet to make trouble.
ורבין משתמש בזה נגד הימין. כאשר אתה אומר לציבור שהמתנחלים הרגו ערבי, פלסטיני, רק ממניעים גזעניים, רק ממניעי טרור, אתה מבעיר את השטח.
When you knowingly tell the public that Jews murdered an Arab merely out of racist hate for Arabs, and you know that you're lying, you're setting fire to the entire region. You're exploding the entire situation, and you're putting everybody's lives in danger.
אתה גורם לסיכון עצום של בני אדם. עכשיו, כשאתה עושה את זה במודע, והשב"כ עושה את זה במודע, ורבין עושה את זה במודע, אתה בעצם מפקיר דם.
Shabak knew it. They did it knowingly. Rabin did it knowingly because he had private access to Shabak. They all knew that essentially they're putting Jewish blood on the line for political purposes, advancing a lie.
של יהודים.
ובכל זאת אני שואל את צביקה צובר, האם אין מקום לחשבון נפש גם מצדכם? הרי בקריית ארבע מתגוררים ופועלים פעילים של ארגון אייל שהזדרז לקבל אחריות לרצח.
סך הכל יש יהודי אחד שהוא אייל, זה אבישי רביב, שאתם נותנים לו כותרת ובמה בלי סוף, וכתוצאה מזה מדביקים תו שלם על יישוב שלם.
September 22, 1995, and in Israel, they first have the day, then the month. 6 days before Oslo number 2.
בלילה הגיעו חברי ארגון אייל להר הרצל כדי להשביע חברים חדשים על קברי עולי הגרדום.
המפקד שלהם, המכונה מלאכי, נעצר שלשום, והנה הוא לפניכם.
טוב למות בעד ארצנו, וגם...
More coverage on Israeli media of a gathering of right-wing extremists wearing these masks, talking about that they're ready to kill Arabs if that stops Oslo II.
טוב להרוג בעד ארצנו. אם צריך, גם נפעל בנושא הזה.
נשק יש.
ברוך השם.
Do you have weapons to kill Arabs? Baruch Hashem, thank God, we have plenty of weapons to kill Arabs.
כיצד אתם מתכוננים לשבש את ההסכם?
How do you really expect to sabotage the agreement between the government of Israel and Arafat?
בין ממשלת ישראל לערפאת. יהיה הרבה דם.
There will be a lot of blood. And there will be blood of Israeli soldiers also. We're going to kill them all.
גם נגד חיילי צה"ל. אם חיילי צה"ל יבואו לפנות אותנו, נילחם בהם. אבל
If Israeli soldiers try to get in our way, then we'll take care of them too. Because Hebron is more important, and the blood of Jews is more important than any individuals who are going to stop us. Now understand, none of these groups ever did anything. We don't know if these are groups or these are 3 or 4 or 5 people with a mask. The media played them up as a tremendously big thing, but they weren't. There were 3 or 4 guys who cut a couple of face masks and put out these threats and made everybody crazy.
בשנה הקרובה, אנשים ישכחו את ברוך גולדשטיין.
יצחקי, שהוא ראש אגף האבטחה, שב"כ, מתקשר בזעזוע אחרי שהוא רואה את הטקס בהר הרצל, ואומר, תגידו, מה קורה? אז...
So the head of Shabak was watching the news that night on TV, and he saw this, and he called his own people and said, what the heck is going on here?
אלי ברק לעדותו, אומר לו, הם כולם משלנו.
What is going on here? He's the head of the Shabak. Did you see what was on the news last night? So he called Eli Barak, who was the head of the Shin Bet Jewish unit, Rosh Chativa Yehudit, and he called him and said, "What the hell's going on?" And Eli Barak said, "It's okay, that's our people." Those guys with those masks saying we're going to kill Jews, even members of the IDF, being interviewed on the news, those were Shabak people. Omar lo hem kulam mishalanu. This is a deep state.
בראייה לאחור זה ממש ברור שיש פה ארגון ממוסד שארגן את הכותרות, את כותרות המשנה.
It was clear as we look back that there was a very well coordinated organization that was organizing headlines, organizing with the media, that had pictures ready, that had headlines ready, and impacting public opinion.
את התמונות, זה הכל היה מעשה ידיו להתפאר.
מי שבעצם...
And this was all the Jewish unit of the Shabak.
בעצם יצר את האווירה הציבורית של הסתה שקדמה לרצח. זה אבישי רביב.
And they were doing it through this guy, Avishai Raviv, chanting at the demonstration against Rabin when he's being paid by the Shabak.
אין לי ספק שמי שעומד מאחורי מאות הפעולות של אבישי רביב, אלה מפעיליו.
כשהוחלף ראש השב"כ, הם הצליחו לערוך הפגנה במקום מגוריו של ראש השב"כ החדש כף, להזמין כמובן את התקשורת.
שירותי הביטחון הפכו להיות כלי בידי הממשלה נגדנו, ואותו ראש שב"כ כבר הצהיר בעבודה שלו על נטיות פוליטיות מובהקות.
כרמי גילון אומר שהוא לא הכיר אותו.
So the question is, how much did the head of Shabak actually know Avishai Raviv? Karmi Gilon צריך לשאול אותו את השאלות, אבל קרמי גילון יש לו הרבה מאוד תיאוריות.
קרמי גילון צריך לשאול אותו את השאלות, אבל קרמי גילון יש לו הרבה מאוד תיאוריות על ההיכרות שלו עם אבישי רביב. לא נשמע הגיוני שכל השב"כ יודע שאבישי רביב...
Does it sound logical to you that the entire Shabak knows that Avishai Raviv is one of them?
הוא מי שלנו, אוקיי? וקרמי גילון לא יודע את זה.
Does it make sense? All right. Does it make sense that everyone else in the Shabak knows that Avishai Raviv works for them, except for the chairman of Shabak, except for the director of Shabak, Karmi Gilon, that does it make sense to you, he says to the reporter, that Karmi Gilon is the only person in Shabak who doesn't know what everyone else knows, that Avishai Raviv works for them?
את אבישי רביב באותו זמן לא הכרתי. פעם ראשונה.
So here is an interview that on Galei Tzahal, Israeli radio, the reporter Ariel Segal was interviewing Karmi Gilon and was asking him, this is only like about several years ago, and he's asking him, so what's the story? What was your relationship with Avishai Raviv? And he says the first time I ever heard of him was at the Amnon Abramovich.
מה ששמעתי את שמו היה כשאמנון אברמוביץ' הזכיר את שמו בערוץ 2.
First time I ever heard of him, I didn't even know there's a guy named Avishai Raviv. This is the head of the Shabak. He says, I heard there's a guy named Abramovich, and I didn't know anything at all about him. So the reporter says, so what you're saying is neither you nor Gideon Ezra, the other head of the Shabak, had any idea who this guy is.
אתה רוצה לומר, לא אתה ולא גדעון עזרא ידעתם שמי שמארגן הפגנה מול הבית של ממלא מקום ראש השב"כ הוא סוכן שב"כ?
In other words, you're telling me, the reporter says, that the guy who organized a militant demonstration outside the house of the assistant head of Shabak, that you and everyone else, that none of you knew who that guy was.
ברור שבמחלקה היהודית ידעו מי זה אבישי רביב.
Okay, let's say it this way. Clearly the head of the Shabak Jewish unit would have known who Avishai Raviv is, but not me.
אבל ראש השב"כ לא יודע על כל נוד.
The head of the Shabak, me, I don't know every single detail about what my underlings know and do.
תסלחו לי שתוקעים באיזשהו מקום.
אלה תיאורים ותזות שהן מסתמכות על בורות של הציבור. אני 100% שהוא הכיר את אבישי רביב, ואם הוא לא הכיר את אבישי רביב, זה הרבה יותר חמור.
First of all, I am absolutely certain that the head of Shabak knew who Avishai Raviv is. And if he didn't know who he is, that's even worse. Think to yourself, the head of Shabak, right under his nose,
עכשיו, ראש שב"כ, מתחת לאף שלו, יש מחתרת יהודית חדשה.
There's a new Jewish underground right under his nose.
שעושה מאות פעולות נגד פלסטינים.
He's been perpetrating hundreds upon hundreds of violent actions against Arabs.
וראש השב"כ לא יודע מי זה?
And the head of Shabak doesn't know that?
אני לא קונה את זה. לא קונה את זה ש...
I don't buy it. I don't buy that Rabin didn't ask about it.
שרבין לא שואל. אני לא קונה את זה שכרמי גילון לא יודע. אני לא...
I don't buy that Carmi Gilon, the head of Shabak, didn't know. And I don't buy that Carmi Gilon did not reveal it to Rabin.
אני קונה את זה שכרמי גילון לא מגלה לו. אני לא קונה את זה. זה שנה וחצי. זה לא שבוע.
I don't buy any of this. This was a year and a half, not just a week.
שנה וחצי לא יכול לקרות דבר כזה, בלי שרבין...
You can't have this going on that it went on for a year and a half and Rabin had no idea.
ידע מזה. אתה לא יכול להתחמק מהמסקנה שהיחידים שיצאו נזכרים מההפעלה הפרובוקטיבית של אבישי רביב ושותפיו בשב"כ בגזרת קריית ארבע וחברון, זו הייתה ממשלת רבין.
You can't avoid the conclusion that the insiders and the violent people who are committing hundreds of these violent acts over that year and a half after Oslo, you can't accept that the government of Rabin had nothing to do with that.
באזור 94, אוקטובר, אתה מילאת מקום של יעקב פרי כראש השב"כ. אתה זוכר את זה, נכון? אתה ממלא המקום. הוא למד.
כן.
והתמודדת אז על רשות השב"כ מול גדעון עזרא. זה ודאי זכור לך.
כן.
איך רבין, שהוא ראש ממשלה ותיק ומנוסה, בא ויוזם את זה שבראש השב"כ, באמצע גל של פיגועי התאבדות, יעמוד...
Possible that Rabin, an experienced political leader with years of experience, names a new head to Shabak when the previous one steps down. And he names a guy with no prior experience in the field whatsoever with Arab terror. Names a guy that has no professional on his resume dealing with Arab terrorism.
עוד מישהו שהוא חסר ניסיון לחלוטין בכל הנושא של התמודדות עם טרור ערבי. אתה צריך למצוא מועמד שיראה עין בעין עם ראש הממשלה על הפעלה.
Clearly he was going to name someone that had the same worldview, political view as the Prime Minister.
כזאת מפוקפקת של סוכן. אולי יצחק רבין יותר מתעניין בדעה הפוליטית של המועמדים שלו מאשר הניסיון שלהם בלהפעיל גוף כמו השב"כ.
בא אליי יום אחד, אומר לי, ברוך, אני רוצה לחסל את...
A guy comes up to me one day and says to me, Baruch, his name is Baruch Marzel. He says to me, Baruch, I want to assassinate Faisal Husseini.
פייסל חוסייני. אני אומר לו, תשמע, אני לא מתעסק בדברים האלה.
So I responded, listen, I don't get involved in things like that.
תשמע, ראש הזה, אני לא מתעסק, אני...
He was insistent. No, really, let's assassinate Faisal Husseini. So I kept coming back. I said, I don't get involved with things like that. I don't care if it happens. I'm not saying I'll cry if he gets assassinated, but that's not my...
לא אכפת לי שזה יקרה, אבל אני לא מתעסק בדברים האלה. אני מתעסק בדברים חינוכיים, אידיאולוגיים.
I'm an educator. I teach people, I teach ideology. I don't go around assassinating people.
אני לפעמים גם עשיתי הפגנות, היה לי מאות מעצרים.
I go to some demonstrations, I make some demonstrations. I've been arrested in the past to demonstrate. I don't go around assassinating people.
וכולי וכולי, אבל אין לי הרשעה בבית משפט מחוזי. אחרי כמה ימים הוא בא אליי, הוא אומר, לפחות תן לי כסף.
After several days, the guy comes back again. He says, I understand you don't want to assassinate Faisal Husseini, but maybe you could help me out. I don't have the money to buy the weapons. So I responded to him, 3 stars. In other words, go blank yourself. I don't get involved with these things.
אמר לך, אני לא מתעסק בדברים, לוחץ ולוחץ ולוחץ.
He keeps pressuring and pressuring. I need money, please help me.
בסוף בא אליי נועם פדרמן, אומר לי, זהר מי... הוא סוכן.
Finally, Noam Fetterman, another person in those right-wing circles, together with Baruch Marzelin, says, you better watch out for that Mamzer. He's a Shabak agent.
שב"כ. בא אליי פעם סוכן שב"כ בשם...
One time, that's Noam Fetterman. One time, a Shabak agent by the name of Speeped Out says, and Fetterman says, really, I could tell you the guy's name. It's no longer secret.
אני יכול להגיד את השם הזה, זה כבר לא מוסתר. הוא מגיע להפגנות ומדבר איתי ועם עוד...
He's a guy, comes to talk to me, goes to demonstrations, he comes over.
כמה אנשים שם וזה.
There were other people.
ואז יום אחד הוא מתקשר אליי, נועם, אני רוצה להיפגש איתך.
And he contacts me, Noam, I'd like to get together with you, sort of one-on-one, I want to talk to you about something.
טוב, נפגשים. לוקח אותי עם הרכב שלו נבי מוסה.
So he comes and he picks me up, and he drives me to a place called Nebi Musa, which is, Arabs believe that's the mountain where Moshe died, where Moshe Rabbeinu died, in the desert, Nebi Musa.
מוציא את האקדח שלו, אומר לי, בוא נאמן אותך.
He takes out a pistol, and he says, I want to teach you something about shooting a pistol. He just called me up out of the blue, gives me a lift to Nebi Musa, and Ani Amen Otcha Ketzat Bieri. I want to just train you a little in shooting a pistol.
קצת בירי, נהייתי מאבטח באלעל, אני צלף וזה. אנחנו שנינו יורים על קופסאות שימורים, ואז הוא אומר...
So, okay, I hung around with him. We both started shooting at cans.
אומר לי, תשמע, יש לי רובה עוזי.
And he says to me after a while, I have an Uzi machine gun. And I have it hidden somewhere underneath a certain boulder.
מוסתר באיזה נקודה כלשהי מתחת לאיזה סלע. יש פה את המשלחת הירדנית-פלסטינית. תשמע, הם...
And there's going to be there's scheduled to be a delegation of Arabs from Jordan who are going to be coming and meeting with an Arafat delegation. And they're going to be coming along the Jerusalem-Jericho highway.
יעברו בכביש ירושלים יריחו. אתה לוקח אותי לאיזה צוק, משקיף על הכביש.
Would you be kind enough to drive me to a particular lookout mountain along that road, and I will have an Uzi for you, and you, Noam, will fire the Uzi, and I will then secret you off to a safe place.
סדר לך עוזי, ואתה תירה בעוזי.
You know, don't you ask yourself, I mean, even as I'm watching this, don't you ask yourself, no, you have the car, you have the Uzi, you're the one teaching me how to shoot, why don't you do it?
ואני אמלט אותך מהמקום. וואלה, רעיון יפה והכל טוב ויפה, אבל אמרתי לו...
So he says, you know, very nice, lovely idea. I said to him, blank, 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 actually, as between the two of us, mi bein shnenu atapo hamikzoan. You're the professional, lo ani. You're the one should be doing it.
מבין שנינו,
Of course.
אתה פה המקצוען, לא אני. אתה עברת קורס מאבטחים באלעל. אז הוא אומר לי, כן, אבל זה, הלאה, משהו.
He responds to me, yeah, but
הוא הריח לי לא טוב, מספר לי מישהו
there was not a good smell to this, and he tells me something.
אחר. אומר לי, בוא תשמע, יש איזה אחד, מה זה נראה לי סוכן שב"כ? אמרתי לו, למה? מה, אתה סתם אומר על בן אדם? הוא אומר לי, לא, קוראים לו יציע לי עוזי, שנמצא תחת צלע, הוא אומר לי, בוא נעשה פיגוע.
He goes and he walks Fetterman to the boulder, pulls out the Uzi, and says, let's do this.
אחת מהפרשיות הכי תמוהות.
Now again, remember, Fetterman, Baruch Marzel were leaders in the right wing. And so they're trying to take these guys down. Now, probably one of the most, one of the most disturbing and shocking, one of the most shocking of all incidents that happened during this time, I referred to it much earlier today, was the incident of the Kahalani Brothers.
באותה תקופה היא פרשיית האחים קהלני, ובה השב"כ נקט בצעדים מרחיקי לכת ומסכני חיים.
In this case, Shabak took steps that broke all boundaries and put lives in danger.
באמצע גל פיגועים רצחני, עשרות...
It was a period of many murderous attacks by Arabs against Jews. Many tens of people had died. These things happen in spurts sometimes, like an intifada.
שני אחים מקריית ארבע שחבריהם נהרגים בפיגוע.
So there were these two brothers from Kiryat Arba, and some of their friends had been killed in an Arab attack. And they wanted, therefore, to avenge.
מחליטים לעשות מעשה נקם. הם משיגים רובי M16 מהנשק.
So the Kahalani brothers obtained an M16 rifle from the General Armory of Weapons in Kiryat Arba.
של קריית ארבע, ומתכננים לירות בערבים בפאתי ירושלים.
And they decided they're going to shoot Arabs in the outskirts of Jerusalem. And I talked to you at the beginning of class, there are two versions of the story. But in both cases, it's pretty much, they're going to kill Arabs.
השב"כ מגייס סוכן בתוך קריית ארבע.
The Shabak sent an agent into Kiryat Arba.
אותו נכנה א', שמציע
His name was Aleph, A. We don't know his name. He was simply an agent named A. And he offered to give the Kahalani brothers a lift. And he'll be bringing the weapons.
להם בכך שהוא ייקח את הנשקים, יעביר אותם במחסום בין גוש עציון לירושלים.
And he's going to drive them on the highway towards Jerusalem. And again, there's another version with the eggs that we talked about at the beginning today, that they were in the market of that egg prices were very high in Israel and very low among the Arabs, and they were buying eggs from Arabs and then going to sell them to Israelis at a markup. But anyway,
מנת שהם לא יסתכנו בתפיסה שלהם. הם מסכמים את נקודת המפגש בתוך ירושלים.
So the deal is they're going to go to a certain meeting point in Jerusalem and at a parking lot.
מגרש מכוניות ברחוב נג'רה, שם הסוכן מעביר להם בחזרה את הנשקים.
There, the Shabak agent will bring them the weapons, and then they will continue driving towards the attack point in the town of Batir, B-A-T-I-R. The Jewish one is Beitar, and this is the Arab one, Batir.
והם ממשיכים הלאה לכיוון הכפר בתיר. בשעה יהודה עולה הרכב שלהם, GMC לבנה, על כביש...
So they're driving their white GMC on that road, that dusty road, towards Batir.
שפר לכיוון הכפר בתיר, שם הם מסובבים את הרכב עם הפנים לירושלים.
And as they're getting close to the shooting point, they park their car, get out.
פונים למילוט ואורבים בצד הדרך
And as they get out, they're waiting to ambush and kill some Arabs, any Arabs. And as that's going on, some Arabs on the road happen to be passing by.
ערבי אקראי שיעבור במקום. באותן דקות ממש חוזר לביתו זיאד שמי, פועל ערבי בן 24, רכוב על אופניו.
And just at that time, some Arab, 24 years old, is riding by on a bicycle.
יהוידע קורע בערך מאחורי הרכב עם נשק דרוך.
So what happens is he stops.
מוכן לפעולה. איתן ניגש לערבי, שואל
Eitan, Kahalani, goes to the Arab and asks, does he have money?
אותו אם יש לו כסף. זיאד שמי השיב בשלילה.
The Arab says, I don't have any cash on me.
וברגע שאיתן מבין שמדובר בערבי,
And at the moment that Eitan understands, just a second, so as soon as he gets like within a meter and a half, that's 60 inches, 5 feet. So as soon as he gets within about 5 feet, he pulls the trigger of the M16 rifle to kill the Arab.
הוא דורך את הנשק ממרחק של 1.5 מטר וסוחט את ההדק. אף כדור לא יצא מהקנה. יהוידע כיוון גם הוא את הרובה.
But nothing came out. And so he's got his brother there, who's also been given a rifle.
וגם אצלו נשמע קול נקירה ריק.
And likewise with him, no bullet comes out. The two Kahalani brothers shooting the rifles that they were given by the Shabak agent, and the rifles don't have bullets. So the Arab goes his way.
האחים מחליטים להסתלק, אך
And the Kahalani brothers decide we better get out of here real fast. But after just a matter of moments, Shabak shows up on the scene in the middle of nowhere and arrests them.
אחרי כמה עשרות מטרים על ידי השב"כ. מסתבר שהשב"כ תצפת ועקב אחרי צעדיהם של האחים כל הזמן. הסוכן לקח מהם את הנשקים.
Basically, Shabak had been waiting for them the whole time, took the weapons, and then they took them and arrested them.
והעביר לשב"כ שעיקר אותם על ידי הוצאת הנוקר. כשהסוכן החזיר לאחים את הנשקים, הם כבר לא היו שמישים לפעולה. השב"כ
Basically, when the Shabak agent had given it to them, he had taken the firing pin or whatever off the rifle, and so neutralized the rifles.
תראה מה השב"כ עשה פה. תאר לך מצב.
That is Fetterman explaining. See what Shabak did. Ask yourself. Ask yourselves. 2 M16s and nothing came out.
שהוא יורה ב-M16 המעוקר ולא יוצא כלום. מה הוא עושה? שואב את האקדח ויורה.
So what would you expect? Maybe he would throw his 2 rifles aside and he would have a pistol.
אתה יודע איזה סיכון הם לקחו פה? שזה מה שיקרה?
So if you believe this story, that they wanted to kill an Arab, then they had a gun of their own. Why didn't they shoot their own gun? So the whole story doesn't add up. Which brings us to the last 3 minutes. The famous, infamous, notorious, the demonstration. Rabin had just signed Oslo II. And remember, all the tragedies of the last 30 years that were brought about by Oslo II, giving Yasser Arafat his own country. It's not exactly a so-called Palestinian state, but he was given his own country in Judea, Samaria. He was given control of television, newspapers, radio, the educational system for 30 years of children, summer camps, everything, all the aggravation that has come out of there from the last 30 years. As with every single time Israel ever has given up land to Arabs, never once has there been a happy end result. So it's the night in 1995 at the big there have been massive demonstrations by the right wing that get no coverage. And so this is a one-time counter public demonstration by the left wing that gets complete media coverage. And we go.
על עובדה בסיסית אחת, אבישי, אין לה כל ספק, הוא שאתה היית חבר קרוב של יגאל עמיר.
There is no question, 30 years later, but that Avishai Raviv was Yigal Amir's closest friend, or so Amir thought.
המיינסטרים של הציבור בישראל לא יודע את הקשר העמוק שהיה בין יגאל עמיר לאבישי רביב והחבר.
The mainstream of Israeli society has no idea of the tightness of the connection between Yigal Amir and Avishai Raviv and the people closest to the two of them. This is Avishai Raviv, this is Yigal Amir.
החברות המאוד קרובה שלהם.
ככל שאבישי רביב צעקן ומתלהם ועושה הצגות, יגאל עמיר שקט.
By contrast, whereas Avishai Raviv is loud, demonstrating public personality in the media, Yigal Amir was quiet like a mouse, didn't speak, doesn't shout, soft-spoken.
מדבר, לא צועק, אבל צמוד פיזית לאבישי רביב.
The exact opposite of Avishai Raviv. Now, back to the speech. Somebody here on the stage of this pro-Rabin demonstration. I would say that's probably Yossi Sarid, looking at him from this angle. And he's speaking about how we're going to have peace between the Arab, the Rabin, that we're going to have peace between the Arabs.
יש 8 דיווחים בתיק של יגאל עמיר מלפני הרצח.
There were 8 reports in the Yigal Amir file at Shabak before the assassination. They already had a file on him with 8 reports.
כל הדיווחים של אבישי רביב.
All 8 reports were signed by Avishai Raviv. Headline in Yediot Achronot, one of the main papers in Israel, HaShabak shalach et Avishai Raviv lekayem birur odot Yigal Amir 3 chodashim lifnei ratzach Rabin. Avishai Raviv had been sent by the Shabak to handle him 3 months before the assassination.
אנחנו יודעים שאבישי רביב אומר ליגאל עמיר ללא הפסקה. צריך...
We know for a fact that Avishai Raviv regularly egged on Yigal Amir and kept saying, we have to kill Rabin. Tzarich lirtzoach et Rabin. We have to murder Rabin.
לרצוח את רבין.
Yediot Achronot, Avishai Raviv hatzit et Amir lirtzoach et Rabin, that he constantly incited him. Ata rak medaber. Nir'eh otcha gever. You talk a lot. Let's see you be a man. Kach amar Avishai Raviv liYigal Amir leta'anat talmidot ulpanat lehava b'kidumim. people testified. That's how he spoke to him. כאשר סיפר לו אמיר על כוונתו לרצוח את יצחק רבין. That whereas when Amir would say he wants to kill him, Rabin, that Avishai Raviv would say, you just talk a lot. Let's see you prove you're a man.
עודד ודחף את יגאל עמיר לרצוח את ראש הממשלה.
שבוע טוב. תרשו לי לומר שאני גם מתרגש.
יגאל עמיר אמר שהוא ניסה לפגוע ברבין כמה פעמים בווינגייט, בכל מיני מקומות, וזה לא הלך לו. הוא מנסה...
Avishai Raviv later explained he had tried previously for an opportunity to kill Rabin, and it never worked out. He wanted to kill him first in January 22 of that year.
לרצוח את רבין בפעם הראשונה ב-22 בינואר 95, זאת אומרת שהוא כבר 10 חודשים במוד של רוצח.
And for 10 months, because he killed him in November, so he tried to kill him in January. So this is something he was carrying around with him for 10 months. Now I know, says Fetterman, that Avishai Raviv made fun of him, mocked him, and told me, Yigal Amir told me.
אני יודע שאבישי רביב צחק עליו, הוא סיפר לי, הוא צחק עליו, הוא אמר, אתה לא באמת רוצה, נראה אותך, תהיה גבר, תעשה את זה.
And I know that constantly Avishai Raviv incited Amir and said, be a man, stop talking, let's see you do it.
הוא ישב, ככל הנראה, עם האחים אמיר, ותכנן את רצח ראש הממשלה, רק ביקש.
He sat with Amir and with Amir's 2 brothers. And the whole time they planned out the assassination. He simply said he can't be involved, that Avishai Raviv, he can't be involved in the operation. But he planned them out.
לא להשתתף בביצוע.
ליל חמישי, יושן במאחז שנקרא מעלה ישראל. הוא...
And so this was that night. Avishai Raviv and others.
אבישי רביב ועוד אחרים. למחרת יום שישי נוסע לתל אביב.
Next day, on Friday, went to Tel Aviv.
תל אביב. הוא מחליט החלטה של רגע אחד, שהוא מוציא את...
And Amir decided on the spot, in a moment, to take out the bullets that were in his gun and switch the bullets with different ones. שהוא מוציא את הכדורים שנמצאים באקדח שלו ומחליף אותם בכדורים אחרים.
כדורים שנמצאים באקדח שלו ומחליף אותם בכדורים אחרים.
וזה שהוא זהיר, אני לא מאוד לא מופתע.
And the idea that Yigal Amir was that cautious that he would switch bullets, I'm not surprised. In September 94, a year earlier, according to certain sources, Shabak did something like that to the Kahalani Brothers, where they gave them weapons that had fake bullets. So I cannot say that if that happened September 94 and Amir, the assassination was November 95, I cannot say that 14 months later he may not have been suspicious that Shabak might have passed him a gun with fake bullets.
בספטמבר 94, לפי מקורות זרים, שב"כ עושה מה שהוא עושה לאחים קהלני, והוא יודע מזה, אז יש לו סיבה מוצדקת להיות זהיר.
So you gotta say he had a good reason to be extra cautious.
זהיר, מתוכנן.
אז מה בעצם אתה אומר שקרה פה?
So what ultimately do you say happened here? Ma ba'etzem ata omer shekara po. What exactly are you saying? And keep in mind, as this video comes to an end, you got to be very careful. It may be illegal. It may be illegal in Israel to say that anyone but Yigal Amir killed him, and to say that Raviv was involved. There's a narrative. It's not like America. In America, you can go around saying Lee Oswald did not do it, and you could doubt the reports that came out on the Kennedy assassination, and you could say it was an FBI job, or Candace Owens says it was the AIPAC or something like that, the Mossad. You could say any crazy conspiracy about anything. In Israel, you can get arrested and lose your work and everything. So the question is, Ma ba'etzem ata omer shekara po? What exactly are you saying happened here? And you cannot answer that question. And that's where the movie ends. Now, I want to read you from Wikipedia on Avishai Raviv. Amir is serving a life sentence. And Avishai Raviv was, and not only Amir, but the way it works is that Amir's brother was sentenced to prison for 17 years for having known that his brother was planning it and not having told the authorities. And Amir's girlfriend was sentenced for like 5 years. She has served her time, and the brother, the brother got out in 2012. So the brother got out, served 17 years, girlfriend got out, and that was because of that they knew about it, that they knew he was talking about it. All right. So he was brought to trial in 2000 for not preventing the assassination. Raviv mounted a successful defense, never served a day, on the grounds that he had just been doing his job, and events had spun out of control. During Raviv's interactions with Yigal Amir as an informant, the Shin Bet grew suspicious that Raviv had not reported everything he knew about Amir's handlers, not about Amir to his handlers, even though he had filed 8 reports signed by him. Raviv was interrogated under suspicion, admitted that he had not disclosed info about Amir. After it was revealed that he had been a Shin Bet agent operating with the Israeli right-wing circles, there were calls, mainly from the political right, for him to be prosecuted. He was charged with failure to prevent the crime, based on claim that he knew of Amir's intentions, but did not report them to his Shin Bet handlers, and also with supporting a terrorist organization. In April 1999, an indictment was filed on the first charge, failure to prevent a crime, and he was acquitted. And here was the ruling. The judges ruled that Raviv did not know of Amir's intent to assassinate. The verdict stated, and again, my source is thoroughly non-political. This is Wikipedia. No one has ever accused Wikipedia of being pro-Israel. And here we go. The judges ruled, no actual motive was presented to us for why the defendant would knowingly and maliciously conceal from his handlers information he had received about Yigal Amir's intent to murder the Prime Minister. On the contrary, the body of evidence presented suggests that the defendant had a strong motive to report Amir's intentions to the Shin Bet if he had known of them. This is because the Shin Bet was his whole world. And had he reported something that could have thwarted the assassination, he would have been regarded as a hero, and his self-image, as well as his image in the eyes of those who mattered to him, namely the Shin Bet personnel, would have been elevated. The second consideration relates to the defendant's personality. As understood from various sources presented to us, The defendant was described, among other things, as having the mental capacity of a child, with a low personal sense of self-esteem, and unable to distinguish between what is important and what is trivial. All right, remember at the very beginning today, I talked about the corruption in Israel's judiciary, as did Mark Levin. So this is the finding on which the Shin Bet guy gets let off. Just like Peter Strzok and Lisa Payne and Andrew McCabe, and how much time have they spent in prison? So the finding is he was childish, with a low personal level, unable to distinguish between what is important and what is trivial. So he wouldn't understand the difference of importance between reporting that someone's going to do X, Y, Z versus someone's going to assassinate the Prime Minister of Israel. He wouldn't be able to distinguish that the assassination of the Prime Minister would be more significant, even though he was on salary for a year and a half and was able to convince at least 2 women to marry him. A psychiatrist called as a defense witness described him as having a narcissistic personality disorder. All right, no. Our conclusion, therefore, is that we are not dealing with someone of high personal strength, inner resilience, or self-confidence. You saw him interviewed on Israeli TV several occasions during this afternoon. You saw him give a lot of interviews live on Israeli TV. But the court says he did not have personal strength, inner resilience, or self-confidence, but rather a person with a weak and somewhat dependent personality, a people pleaser, which raises concerns about the possibility of a false confession. The third consideration pertains to the defendant's life circumstances in the 8 years preceding the assassination. The verdict stated that it would not be an exaggeration to say that during his 8 years as an informant, 8 years, the defendant lived in a world of lies. He was constantly pretending. He lied to those around him, to his parents, to his then wife, to the media, even to the Shin Bet. The legal grounds for his acquittal included difficulties in accepting the memorandum of the Shin Bet investigators who interrogated Raviv after the assassination as admissible evidence in his trial, as well as the testimony of the assassin himself, Yigal Amir. I want to thank you for being here with us this entire day. I believe this is one of the most important things that I've seen. It's Tisha B'Av material. And I just want to make this final point as I break, and I'll take a little break. I have another film coming up soon, but I do want to share this with you, and I'll do it kind of quickly-ish. There's no such word, but that doesn't matter. I want to see if I can get this on screen. Sure I can. All right. This version has 1,500 comments. I want to just read you, not 1,000, but I just want to give you a sense. These are mostly Israelis. And of course, it's all Hebrew. I did something they would not have anticipated, having a guy doing it all in English. And just to get an idea of some of the first 5 or 10, some of the Israeli feedbacks. Extensive, not expensive. Oh, the director of the movie, Riklin was the writer, and the director of the movie was arrested by the Shin Bet and held in prison for 6 months before the movie came out to try to stop the movie. So that's the way they prove there's no deep state, by arresting the director of the movie and locking him up for 6 months. Just want to, for those who might not be able to read it completely. Just give you one more. All right. Just a few more. All right, this will be the last one. October 7. All right. Okay, you got the idea. So I want to thank you for watching with me and for sharing in this truth. We love Israel. Hard to find people who love Israel more than we. But we have to face what we have to face, and it helps us to love Israel, to know what's going on. When you pick up a newspaper or read, and you hear some of the things, the Israeli Supreme Court ruled this, or the Israeli Attorney General, or the head of the Shabak, it is so important to know who's who and what's going on there. Gives us a better insight. Okay, take a break. For some of you, regardless, have a meaningful fast the rest of the day. And our final film, and it's going to be another doozy, nothing like this, but at 6 p.m., which is soon, we're going to have a film called originally Unsettled, and now it's called Withdrawal from Gush Katif. It's the movie Ariel Sharon withdrew from Gaza in 2005. 2 years later, a movie was made about the tragedy. And now you look at it 20 years later, and you ask yourself, did these people know what they were talking about when they warned you better not give up Gaza? We're going to pay a price for it. So we'll take a little break, and 6 o'clock is 15 minutes from now. We don't say bye-bye. We just say it's 15 minutes from now. Okay.